Use your mic.
So Paloma is here before 7 o'clock and has told me that it is 7 o'clock. So therefore, we have to get started.
He's been telling you it's been 7 o'clock since 7 o'clock.
I know. So
6:15.
I thank everyone for your reminders. Let's get started. Hi, everyone. It's not a formal council meeting. I won't be using the gavel unless you aggravate me.
I'll try not to aggravate you.
So we're doing, since it's a workshop, the public's certainly welcome, and we'll be going through a number of things. It's budget season, so we have to go through budgets. Thank you for the reminders to get started. I apologize for having fun. But let's get started. We've got 3 budget ones to do first, highway, then wastewater, and then water and sewer. I guess highway's up first. It says Mickey and Susan, but I think Susan's going to like strand you, Mickey. You're on your own.
That's okay.
All right.
I'm all right.
Oh, hey, Nick. Nice to see you in person. Oh, everyone's here. That was attendance. Okay. That was roll call.
That was perfect, man.
Good.
You want me to start?
Yeah,
All right.
absolutely. You're on.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, city residents. For those that don't know, I'm the highway superintendent. I think we've kind of talked a little bit before about what we do, but let me just give you a quick briefing. We have 22 employees, including myself, at the highway department. We do a wide array of different tasks, from maintenance of all our city vehicles, fire, police, highway, water. We have milling and paving that falls under us, which is one of our bigger projects that we do. This year we did 14 streets. Along with that goes our ADA ramps. There was 33 ADA ramps that we did this year as part of our CHIPS program for our funding. As you can see on Main Street, we have our Christmas decorations starting to go out. So that's one of the things we do. We were doing some light pole painting on Main Street as well. Just trying to think of some of the bigger projects that we do. Obviously, City Hall, we milled and paved that, line striped that. We got it paved and line striped in one day. We did that on Election Day while city offices were closed. Sidewalks, we've oversaw some sidewalk projects, one on South Avenue. Actually, we did 2 sides of South Avenue in the last 2 years. So we had that going on. Tree planting over at the parks. We had 13 new maple trees, a row of maple trees, along with the Christmas tree that's planted and will be decorated for Christmas. That actually is, I think, all set to be lit up. It's already decorated. Transfer station falls under us as well. Let me just back up 1 second. Milling and paving, obviously, is pretty much an all-hands-on. Water department helps out with that. It's a huge help and instrumental in that. They're mainly our cleanup crew. So as the mill machine goes through, they go around, clean up all around all the structures and get all that wrapped up. So that's a big help from them guys. Just flipping through a couple different things. Obviously, even on page 2 here, we have charging stations. We actually installed those in-house with our maintenance mechanics. We pre-purchased the precast, and then we got everything set up, coordinated with the electrician to get all that set. So those are functioning, one at Cross Street and one at Van Eyck. All the public buildings do fall underneath us. So that's kind of our maintenance, which I think a lot of you know Davey Way, but Davey and Sean are our maintenance mechanics. So they oversee a lot of what goes on there. Some of the larger projects that we help to provide support for is the firehouse across the street. We've done some hauling for the project. We went in prior to the construction or the demo, and we removed some of the valuable copper that was in there, brought it for scrap, returned the money to the city. So that was something that we kind of got a heads up, and I think we also saved money without having the contractor having to gut the building the way we did. We hauled some material out of there for them as well. Anything else they need for support, help setting up the office trailer there. We recently just added a heater hose for the water to go to the Welcome Center so that they have water in the winter. Just trying to think, line striping, we've done line striping throughout the whole city. Everything was done, and then anything we milled and paved has been painted as well. So it's one of the other things that falls under us here in our budget line. In the budget, I don't have any huge changes. Everything's pretty much status quo. So, like I say, we're just running it with 22 staff members, including our 3 mechanics. And we are pretty much a go-to department, as you can see with what we've done. A couple of the other things, that's Davy, and on page 3 there was a railing that was, or a fence that was damaged on Main Street, right by Churchill Street. So we replaced that fence. That was all done in-house. The Madam Brett walkway, the connector trail there, that was 250 feet of guardrail, or I'm sorry, railing that we replaced all new. That was also done in-house, and the water department stepped in and helped us out with that as well. So that's about what I've got under what we do. Again, it's pretty much, we are the go-to department. Anything extracurricular, the banners that get hung up for Veterans Day, the flags that get hung up for Veterans Day, removed, that's all highway department. And parks, yes.
And I would just say Mickey's underselling what they did at the firehouse by some number of things.
We've done we did some test holes pre-construction.
Yeah, there
We've
was
done
a lot of pre-construction where we needed information, we needed to move things to protect it, like we had these beautiful memorial stones that highway carefully removed and stored so that they could come back and not be damaged. We got to a point where the project would have shut down because we didn't have room to take the rock that was being excavated out, and the next day Mickey had dozens of trucks going back and forth between here and the transfer station. So when he talks about his department being the catch-all, it really is. He didn't mention they do snow plowing, which keeps them out all night through parts of the season. They do the leaf pickup. And they really are vital to the quality of life here. And I have to say, Mickey's been extraordinary this year getting things done, whether it's the additional work at the Green Street Park, or we were going to replace a few boards at the Madam Brett walkway. Next thing I know, we're redoing the whole thing. And it's amazing that we have the capacity to do things like that in-house. One of the things under Mickey's purview is sanitation, so you'll see in his proposal, one of the major things going up this year is the cost of recycling disposal. That has nothing to do with things that we control. It really is a market-based price, and we're increasing that. And they also do take care of all of the parks and grounds, so you'll see an increase in parks this year as we're continuing to try to tidy up the parks and make some repairs.
Yeah, the city just helped fund the renovation of the Pop Warner football building. We had some labor that was donated to us, but we purchased the materials. So it was a pretty outdated building. They got a nice siding on there, new windows.
Yeah, it looks a lot better than
Yeah, it looks much better. Obviously, the Parks Department takes care of all the ball fields, whether it's football, soccer, baseball, softball. We collaborate with the school a little bit because the way the school is structured now, they only have one ball field for each softball and baseball, but if they are home, they're using 2 fields, so they typically use Memorial Park as their secondary field. So kind of collaborate with the school as well, getting the ball fields together there.
So I'll only add one thing, which is Chris pointed out a lot of the things you do. The go-to concept is pretty amazing. I think it reflects your managerial style, that you manage to take those people and put them every single place that we need help. So
I appreciate it, Mayor,
Thank
but
you.
you're only as good as your team. And like I said, the water department is very good with us. And the guys on staff are good.
great.
I'm curious, Mickey. I never realized that the Madam Brett walkway was city property.
Yes, it is our property, and Ed could probably explain a little bit more, but that is one of the sewer lines that runs there, which is why we have that and have that control on that.
So it
We
goes-
actually have an easement for that property, George.
So it goes
And it
from the bridge
stipulates
to
that we have to maintain it.
Oh, that's great. No,
That walkway is the one that's over the sewer line.
Yep, yep. And I never realized, I thought that was scenic Hudson or private property or something like that.
I believe they maintain the remainder of the trail, but this section
I
was
think
our
so, too.
responsibility.
Yeah.
And it was outdated, it wasn't really to code, there was large gaps in the railing, so we pretty much got it back up to code with, I spoke to Bruce from the building department and made sure we were up to code, no more than 4 inches of spacing between any of the boards, so no little child can stick their head in there, so everything's
Yeah,
up
and
to snuff there.
I know years ago it was done with like plastic wood or the...
Trex.
Trex, yeah. And it didn't really hold up weather-wise and temperature-wise, and it was warped and everything.
Yeah, it tended to warp.
Yeah, it was great to see it improved, and I really appreciate it.
And
Thank you.
water helped on that, too.
Yeah, the water,
thanks to
yes.
Ed.
Mickey, let me just echo what everybody else has said. I feel like whenever, I call Chris with something, you guys are on it in like 24 hours or 48 hours or something. It's always so impressive, so thank you for everything. I had only one question about your budget, and it's about FY23, and I noticed that we had $30,000 set aside for tree maintenance, but only really got through like a third of that. Is that because there was not enough tree maintenance required this year, or like how does that work?
Well, under tree maintenance, some of it is new plantings.
Oh, it is,
and,
okay.
yeah, that falls under that. And it depends on what we have as far as tree care as well. There are obviously trees that do die on city property that we need to take care of and remove because they are safety hazards. So I think there's a little bit of extra in there for if that does happen. But this year, like I said, we planted 13 or 14 trees in the spring. And then we ended up planting an additional, I think, 5 or 6.
3 on Main,
And then I think there was one dedication at the park that we did.
that's right.
We got to come up with, and I spoke to Chris about this, as far as a better time to plant the trees and do more of a planting in the fall versus spring, because it was very labor intensive to try to keep the trees alive from the spring through the hot summer with watering and all that. So
Okay.
typically, with the flowers on Main Street that we do, it typically would take 3 to 4 hours, but adding the trees on, it was basically one full-time guy, 8-hour shift, 3 days a week.
Wow.
So we lose a lot of labor that way. So
And
I-
most of the money spent this year was on tree planting. Usually, we spend more on limbing and taking trees down, and we did a little bit of that in the park, and we actually did a lot in 2022, so it kind of caught us up. And we have been increasing the number of trees that we plant. We're looking at all of the vacant tree wells on Main Street. Some of them are harder than others because they still have really tenacious root balls and lots of buried infrastructure around them, like gas pipes.
Yeah, we actually, with the water department, the couple in front of the credit union, we actually used the Vector because there were some utilities in there. And we had to try to get the stump that was in there out to plant a new tree. There's electric lines, there was a gas line that was close to that, so with the water department's Vector, we kind of Vectored those out. We took the one down on Main Street, which I know everybody's a little bit upset about, but the condition of the sidewalk, we really had no choice because of the
Nobody
hazard.
mentioned it. We got away with it. Because we only did one. And then we planted a really nice hybrid elm that will help to fill that in.
So there's a little extra there, Dan,
Uh-huh.
anticipating maybe, like I say, a resident calls and says, hey, I noticed a dead tree on city property, it's between, so we don't know what to anticipate or how to
Uh-huh.
figure that in.
Sure. Yeah. I guess my follow-up question to that is I'm not sure how funding works between fiscal years, but I assume that if it's not spent this year, that it's available next year, right? There.
There you go.
Oh, don't assume.
Sorry to make you get up.
So, the figure that's reflected in the presented budget was the October 2nd amount spent. So to date, we have encumbered over 24,000
Oh, okay.
total, spent and encumbered. So we have about 5,600 left in the 2023 budget, and no, it doesn't roll into 2024.
Okay.
So unless there is a purchase order put in and we've ordered the trees for the next year.
Mhm.
So
Okay.
it would close out to fund balance.
That's what, so there's a
right.
fund balance. Okay.
Right.
All right, thank you.
I had a question about Blacktop. It seemed like there was a lot less money going towards it projected for 2024, and I didn't know if that's because you had it in reserves or kind of how that worked.
As far as what, Molly?
As far as projects, so we just got through milling and paving, so I assume Blacktop is part of the paving part of those projects. Maybe it's not, maybe it's some other substance, so I wasn't sure what it was used for. Here comes Sue to rescue you.
Well, I
She
can
doesn't
say,
answer.
before she jumps on, the ADA ramps also come out of that blacktop money that we get from CHIPS.
All right. Yeah, it
Oh,
is.
so
It's
about
the
where the
POP
money
money.
comes from?
The POP money from CHIPS, which is to repair potholes. So Mickey had planned to, instead of in the operating budget, he would do more of it in the capital budget where the CHIPS money lies.
Great, excellent, thank you. And maybe a question for both of you. I hadn't realized that we make money, the city makes money, not a ton of money, off of the EV charging stations. Is that because they're using our electricity, or how does that model work?
It is the charge point system. When we set it up, when people pay for it, it actually goes to ChargePoint, not the city, and ChargePoint ends up paying us the money. So as more people are using it, we have seen that revenue increase, enough where I'm starting to budget for it.
And one other question, maybe more for you, Mickey, is I saw that in your presentation, there's mention of the stairs that are right to our left or north right here. It's not something I think we've talked about at City Council, but I don't know if that's something where we have a plan. I assume, is it repairing the stairs or replacing them, or is it known what that project will involve?
Our thought is to repair the stairs. They are in dire need.
You meant replace?
Replace.
Yes.
I'm sorry, did I say repair?
Yes.
I meant replace, yes.
We've tried to patch them.
Yeah, they've been
Okay.
patched a couple times, and what happens is, especially with concrete, when it has metal in it, the reinforced rebar, if any moisture gets in there, the rebar rusts, and then it swells and it pops the concrete, so it starts to break the concrete. So we're looking to have those replaced. Myself and Chris have talked about it a couple times, and we're going to get some numbers together for the capital, and we
Okay,
can do that.
so we'll probably hear about it maybe at the Capitol.
Yeah, we have the city engineer trying to work up some costs on it.
Okay.
I
So we'll
missed
have,
what stairs you're talking about?
sorry,
The
the
exterior
stairs
stairs.
next to the police
Oh,
station.
yeah,
ones
the
that
two
are
level
there.
side.
Yeah. So it sounds like for this coming winter season, we'll have another winter of doing the best we can with what we have now, but then after that in the
Correct.
spring.
That's what we hope, yes.
I wanted to take a look at the sanitation section. Chris, I know you've been saying that the the cost for recycling was going up, but I see the number going down. I just wanted to make sure I'm not missing something. From 106 of the revised budget to 95?
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was saying from the adopted budget, we did add a bunch of times because the price, so if you look at the 2023 adopted budget for recycling, it was $45,000.
I see.
And that was the baseline from which I was taking the 95. We ended up with, we'll probably be around the 106 because the price did get up as high as $112 or $113 a ton. For reference, we pay about 91 and change to get rid of garbage. So it's now more expensive to get rid of recycled items than it is garbage. That has started to come down a little bit. We've now just dipped on, we're around $100, and we basically looked at an average and then tried to project what we thought it would be for next year. But it's certainly not 45, it's probably the 95.
We did, you averaged 910 ton, times $105 per ton for the 2024 budget.
So I think we've built in, I'm hoping that's, kind of conservative enough that we've more than covered our costs there. And we're hopeful it goes down. We keep hearing from the recycling firms that they're bringing new paper processing plants online in the Northeast, and that should help with the glut of cardboard and paper.
Okay, yeah, thank you for mapping out the full
Sure.
number journey there. And then under the compost program, it looks like our number went up, but if I'm reading the proposal on the agenda later on tonight, our actual cost has gone down.
Yeah, so we can talk about that more with the compost resolution. we were using a company called CRP Sanitation out of Westchester. They had cited us a new cost that was almost double what we were paying. And when I got that cost, I just put in the 17,000 to be safe so we could continue. The compost working group, Faye Leone and Phil Stamatis went and they sought out other firms that could do it. And as you can see, we have a proposal from the compost company. There's another C in there. Community Compost Company. And it's much more competitive than CRP. CRP, for some reason, changed the model of how they charge, and it really hit us hard. And so we went looking for a new vendor, and we got a great new vendor. So we'd like to keep the 17 in there because the extra monies can be used for promotional and educational materials. I talked to Faye today, and we may do another round of the backyard bins and, subsidizing those so people want to buy them.
Okay, great.
I had a question. I'm not sure if this is for you, Sue, maybe for Mickey. I noticed that there's nothing in the actuals for salts for snow removal yet. Is that because it hasn't been charged, or because last winter was as last winter was and we could use our reserves?
Salt was purchased. It's probably not reflected on here because
Right.
we haven't paid, right? We probably not have an
It doesn't
invoice.
reflect an encumbrance, which is the order of the salt. How much did you end up putting in, Mickey? Because we're still under.
Yeah, we're still under. I believe I purchased about $48,000 or $49,000 worth of
Yes.
salt.
Right. So it's reflective of, we filled up our bins at the end of 2022, and we didn't use them at all in 2023.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Mhm. Snowstorms are expensive.
Yeah, the moment you take the number out of the budget, we'll have the mother of all storms.
Yes, exactly.
I know.
That's just how it
yeah.
works.
Listen, I learned a long time ago, it's very hard to budget for snow.
Yeah, just, put a
It's
number
very
in,
hard.
don't worry about
You're
it.
better off having the money in there to
Do
cover
we
yourself.
use seasonal employees for snow at all, or is that all done with kind of people who already work at the city of Beacon?
It's all city employees. Yeah, it's all city employees. It's basically all the highway department guys are on staff and the water department as well. Most of them have their own plow routes, and we got the city divvied up pretty well where we got coverage in all areas. And it's all hands on deck when it starts snowing.
Do they ever use personal vehicles? I feel like I've seen non-city vehicles plowing, no?
No,
No.
absolutely not.
Okay.
They might be doing individuals' driveways, but not city streets.
And then they take it up the road or plow across a city street, and which has happened. But yeah, no, everybody's in the city vehicles, large trucks, small trucks. And then once we get everything wrapped up, we kind of head out on sidewalks as a team and get everything done. All right.
All right.
It looks like you got a budget.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Mickey.
Thanks, Mickey.
Appreciate you being here.
Mayor, next we have Dave Tavernier, our Chief Operator from the wastewater treatment plant. And again, in your packets, you have the excerpts from Dave's part of the budget, along with a 3-page presentation.
So this is the new kid on the block, so you got to be nice to him.
Been here for 2 years, right, David?
He's actually
Still
not the
new.
new kid anymore.
I know, relatively speaking.
Good evening, council, mayor, residents. So sometimes wastewater treatment is looked at as or rather a forgotten part of a city's infrastructure, but yet we all know how important water is, clean water that is, and that's what we do. We reclaim water from wastewater, water that is no longer good for use, but we extract that precious and limited resource. So that's protecting the environment and above all the health of the residents. So it's a very important process that takes place down there. We get an average of about 3 million gallons a day that we process. Yet when we have rain events, wow, we can get up to 10 million in one day. So it's so important that this infrastructure is invested into, and I want to thank the council and the mayor, because this has been a priority, and we're not the forgotten department. And that's something that the city of Beacon, I'm sure, is maybe they're not as aware of, but we give them reasons to be grateful by not having to worry about this. Now, we also generate revenue. We take on different types of waste via haulers, and it's an average of about 750,000 gallons of this waste type per week. They truck it in and we charge them a fee. And so this is something that is beneficial. It helps, take that money and put it back into infrastructure, capital projects, etc. We have 10 that are currently working. We're still looking to hire another person, but there is no changes to the budgeted staff of 11 in the wastewater treatment process and the plant. As far as some of the highlights of 2023, some of the initiatives have been to bring in CMMS, which is a computer maintenance management system. So this has been invested into, and happy to say that we've developed it, implemented, and it's fully operational at this time. Now this computerized maintenance management system, from now on I'll refer to CMMS, it's like a vehicle, right? It allows us to do preventative, predictive, and corrective maintenance. It has to be organized, it has to be administered, and so we had the vehicle, but we didn't have the driver. And so we finally hired in May of 2023 our senior maintenance mechanic, who is now the driver of that vehicle. And so now he's able to not only generate work orders, work requests, but train the personnel, because he's very experienced. And so that's what we're doing. We're looking to train personnel so that they can now have the experience. And some of the maintenance has been deferred for some time, but now we're actively taking care of it through not only this CMMS program, but mainly the application of these work orders, having schedules, having, for example, critical spare parts inventory. Sometimes when something breaks down, you realize you need a part that doesn't exist, or at least the manufacturer will have to machine it and build it, and they tell you, yeah, it'll be a month and a half. So when we identify those parts, we are now ordering them and putting them into this spare parts inventory in CMMS, so that when we do have an emergency, it tells us, you have this part. And so now we are out of an emergency, we replace the part, and we stop the disruption of the wastewater plant. We also have one of the projects that is of the rehabilitation of the primary settling tanks. It's actually 60% complete. I know there's an image there of an empty one. This is showing the nice refurbishment of the concrete and also the mechanical parts of it. And so we're close to being done with the second tank, and the third tank will be completed in the spring of 2024, along with the railing for the entire three tanks. Another very important aspect of wastewater treatment is solids processing, and we have a dewatering system currently that is basically the proverbial car running on or operating on hangers and duct tape. And so sometimes this system will break down and we have disruptions to the plant. We're not able to take haulers. We have to, so yeah, it's a disruption to the city's wastewater plant. So now, working with Ty and Bond, these engineers, they're working through a design, and I believe it's about 90% complete.
Yeah, we're at 90%.
So the design is almost complete, and the city anticipates bidding this project out in early 2024. It's extremely important because we're bringing on a new technology which is called centrifuge technology. So with wastewater, you separate solids from water, and you want to process them in the best way possible so that Even in the future, we're going to look into the beneficial application of these solids. The centrifuge, using centrifugal force, separates the water from the solids to such a degree that it's very dry and is very manageable, and it gives us more options in the future. But that's a new technology that will help the city, along with redundancy, to prevent these disruptions from occurring in the future. So it's forward thinking, and it's something that we're very excited about. Some of the changes proposed for 2024, overtime has increased. And why is that? You know, or maybe you have seen the changing weather patterns, and when we get these rain events, that causes extra flow to come into the plant. We have no control over if we get all of a sudden 2 inches of rain. The flow has to keep going. We're a non-CSO plant, which we don't have a combined sewer. Like it's everything goes through the plant. We have to treat it, whereas other plants, such as, for example, Newbury, they get to a point where if the flow is too much, it just goes straight into the Hudson. But we treat every drop of water that comes through there. So when these rain events happen, we want to staff overnight so that no backups occur, no disruptions happen in the plant, and we implement what is called a wet weather plan. So we change the process to accommodate this extra flow coming in, and so that has increased our overtime budget. We've also increased the purchase of equipment, and the reason or the thrust for this is because since hiring the new senior maintenance mechanic, we want to start doing many of the repairs ourselves as opposed to paying contractors very expensive labor fees. And so to do that, we need tools, and we need other equipment so that we can do it ourselves. That's actually fantastic, because what's going to happen in the future, as we'll see in a couple of lines down, is that we're going to have more money available or spend less by virtue of not giving all of these high-priced contractors work that we are now learning to do in-house because we have the right tools. Chemicals have also increased. We use a series of chemicals, polymer, which is a coagulating chemical. We use an oxidizing agent. Wastewater process generates hydrogen sulfide, and that has to be in a chemical way burned, and that's what an oxidizing agent does. And also hypochlorite for disinfection, that being part of our permit that we have to keep. So we're exploring options to limit or rather reduce the use of these chemicals, and we have already implemented one by installing a fan that was an exhaust fan. It was drawing this hydrogen sulfide out into what is called our odor scrubber or odor control. We were able to reduce the use of this oxidizing agent by 1/3, and this just happened about a couple of months ago. So you can see where we're trying to figure out ways of saving the city the money. And finally, repair of equipment. It's increasing because we still have a lot of aging infrastructure that we have to replace. But we expect that the long term, through CMMS, a senior maintenance mechanic, training with the mechanics, that cost is going to come down. And we will preserve the new equipment that is installed. So in summary, what I said at the beginning, we're not the forgotten department. Quite the contrary, the city has invested very much into the wastewater treatment process, but it will pay its dividends. It'll allow us to maintain ourselves within compliance with state regulations, but more importantly, that precious and finite resource of water will be able to go back into the Hudson River and not affect the Hudson River, but make it a better river, by virtue of how clean the effluent leaving our plant is. And so we, once again, I'm representing a team of 10 men, and I'm thankful for having them work alongside me, and I'm thankful for the council and mayor working alongside us to really show that we are stewards of the environment. So thank you very much. Any questions?
Do we ever see state grants coming down for that water infrastructure? I hear you saying so much about what we're doing for the environment, and I just wonder if our governor helps us with that at all.
We've applied for 2 grants for the dewatering system. One is a WQIP, and then there's a second one, and we had thought they were going to be announced by the end of November, so we're waiting to hear. But we applied for a grant that would cover 40% of the dewatering project. We did apply for that last year, but we didn't get it.
Do we see communities like ours getting it, or do we know why we're competitive or not?
Well, we had heard that we were eligible and they liked the project, but they had a finite amount of money, and then they had a much larger list of projects. So we're hoping that they got further enough down on the list that we're in the next tranche. So, but we're trying. We had Ty and Bond actually do that work so that their specialization came through. We had originally had our grant writer doing that, and you know, it was hard to translate the technical things into a grant application. So we just had our engineers do it this time. We'll see if that worked. We'll report back.
Also with the dewatering system, it sounded like, well, I have a couple questions really, but it sounded like you thought that when the new dewatering system goes in, that there might be different disposal.
Yeah, there will be different options because of the centrifuge treatment is actually, it's more refined. You have a more refined dry solid. And so for beneficial use, it still has to undergo further treatment, but where you are able to deliver it at that stage of dryness, it makes you a better candidate for that. Whereas currently it has too much, it's too wet.
For a better candidate for what? I'm sorry.
For example, beneficial reuse.
So they can use biosolids, which is what they call sludge now, for land application. And certain industries, like silviculture, can use that to apply to land, to fertilize the land. Even if we didn't move to that, we just continued with our current mode, which is landfilling, the new technology reduces the number of truck trips, and then also the fuel and the emissions related to that truck
And the
traffic.
weight, I would assume, if you're getting the
Absolutely,
water out.
yeah. So you go from, you know, it's like a 22% to something over 26. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but that's a lot of water that stays here as opposed to being trucked.
Do you still get to call it a sludge cake, though?
We can still call it sludge cake. I like that much better than the fancy biosolids.
With the big water events that we've had, you know, a couple of this past season, and as you said, expect to have in the future, is there anything as City Council, as we think about future capital projects, that we've kept in mind, any best practices from other people dealing with this that might be something we need to invest in the moderate to longer term?
Yeah, we've been discussing this even as early as this morning and so I think Ed would be able to speak more to that, because what happens is the collection system, sewer system, is something that Ed takes care of. I take care of it where it arrives to me. So I'll let Ed answer that question, but it's a very good question. And certainly there are, but I don't think anybody's prepared for everything that's happening, so there's a lot of developing strategies. So we really have to just keep our eyes open and keep up with the latest, you know, attending some of these fine seminars that are, you know, proposed. Because as everybody's kind of getting caught by the new weather unpredictability, you know. But that's a very good question. As far as that, I'll defer to Ed, if he doesn't mind, as far as that, when he comes on. Thank you.
We also have other investments that are coming at the plant. You want to mention the aerators and some of the projects that come after the dewatering?
Yeah, so we want to rehabilitate our aeration system as well. Our aeration system is where the biological part of the process takes place. This is live organisms, and those are the ones that actually do the cleaning of the wastewater. And so we want to switch to what is called fine bubble diffusion. So that's a more efficient way, lessening the amount of energy that it requires for this treatment to take place. So that's one of the projects that we're looking forward to.
I saw there was an increase or more money expected for the IT consultant. Is that related to the CMMS, kind of the further rollout of that system?
I know that we're trying to invest in a more robust infrastructure. I just had a conversation with our IT consultant this morning, and part of that is also a camera system, a better camera system that helps us in many, many ways. So aside from that, I don't know if there's anything that I'm missing, Chris, as far as IT consultant.
Yeah, I mean, Ed will stress some of this in his presentation. He has more like the cybersecurity. This has been more physical security, so we really didn't have a good system of cameras and monitoring down there, so we've been upping that.
And this is small potatoes, but I saw that the budget for printing bills doubles next year. Is there any particular reason for that?
Yeah, the price has gone up. Fewer and fewer people are printing these days, so our sole supplier at this point, which is what the city has used for many years, just increased their price, I believe about close to 40%. So what we're trying to do now is we're trying to work with ES11. They are an outfit that have designed our hauler portal. And what we're trying to do is see if we can get away from paper. So even though this is on there because we have to, we're going to try to make changes so that this money is not spent that way. And we're not dependent on those paper receipts. But it's a very good question.
What's the line for New Windsor treatment that we haven't spent any, sorry, that's revenue, and we haven't taken any money in since 2021?
I got this one. New Windsor was a entity that we had contracted with, and my predecessor had signed a 10-year contract right before I arrived. I terminated that contract because it was basically giving a broker one half of the fees that we were receiving for all of the leachate that we were bringing in. So the first year, that saved us $240,000. So that'll be coming off the budget at some point. But that went in, you'll see if you go back into the 2021 adopted budget, which isn't on this column, we jumped substantially in our revenues from 2021 to 2022, and we've continued to tick that up. We're raising our rates again for septage, which are going up by 1/2 cent. Our price for filtrate, which is the water that we get from EarthCare, is going up about 5%. And then we actually are lowering the amount we charge for leachate, because we only had 2 companies that were using it, and they were under a contract that came out of the New Windsor, and it was kind of an experiment to see if they'd stick with us. Well, they did, and they loved it. They were at 4 cents. We're moving them to 4.4 cents a gallon. So we're getting beyond the New Windsor treatment days. But they had arranged this deal a long time ago. I don't want to speak badly of them. They had set up a great business, but it was really no longer working in our favor.
Yeah, I think it was useful at the time, but just not anymore.
Yeah. I mean, it was great when they went and they were shopping that and getting it, and that probably warranted having some brokerage fee. At this point, we were mature enough in those contracts that we didn't need a broker.
This is also sort of smallish potatoes, but I noticed that the training budget quadrupled. I assume that's connected to what you were explaining about the need for new tools and equipment or taking on more of maintenance ourselves.
Yeah, as an example, our new senior maintenance mechanic came on board, and he needed to be trained formally through CMMS. So with a CMMS company, which is called eMaint, that's the brand name. So he had to undergo some training with that. There's also the certificates that have to be maintained, the certifications for the certified wastewater treatment operators. So they have to do training that we have to then cover so that they keep their operator certificates. So we have now our senior maintenance mechanic is also certified wastewater treatment operator. So we're looking at also training with the new tools that we're going to be getting. We wouldn't want to just take for granted that somebody knows how to operate a welder and go weld this, right? We're going to save the city a lot of money and they get hurt. So we would formally train them for every piece of equipment that is going to be used for safety purposes, first of all, but also so that the repairs are successful.
And just to clarify, that's actually stayed at 10,000 a year the last 3 years. We just haven't used it a lot, and now we're starting to use it more. So the training line, 443,200, right? Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it's been 10 in the adopted budget, and then we revised it down in 2023 because we hadn't used it. Now that we have the senior maintenance mechanic, we really have a lot of opportunities we didn't have before. He's been training one of our new maintenance mechanics and is really trying to get us ahead of this deferred maintenance curve that we've been trying to catch up on.
I also saw there's a new line for flowers and landscaping. I know that you all have been working with the Green Teens for the last few years, and they've been doing really beautiful work. I was just curious if this was us funding that project or if that's something else.
I think this was the trees we've been planting.
Yeah.
Is it the trees that we
Yeah,
planted?
that might be partially funded, but it also is somewhat out of the Green Teen budget. And then we've been beautifying. We planted some nice river birches in front of the plant. So if you go down, it's a little less austere than it was a few years ago.
Sure, it's nicer to arrive at work that way.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do tree leaves cause a problem for the settling tanks?
No.
Not at all.
Okay.
No.
They're too far away.
Yeah.
On the revenue side, I know that we lost, or if I'm remembering correctly, we lost revenue from the second prison closing, but I'm not seeing it reflected here, and I'm just not sure if I'm looking in the right place.
Dun, dun, dun.
It was reflected last year, the decrease, so, which it didn't end up decreasing. It was about 15%. I think we ended up calculating a decrease in the actuals. So we decreased it last year to reflect it. So 2024 would be similar to 2023.
So that property is still generating 50% of the wastewater it used to?
No.
Downstate was a small fraction
Yes.
of the sewer and water used. So
The majority was Fishkill Correctional.
Mm-hmm.
So we adjusted it down about $100,000 between 2022 and 2023.
Uh-huh.
Not
Right.
quite, but almost.
Yeah, okay, so that is under the correctional facility line, and that's I see it now.
Yeah, that
Okay.
was both of those. So when it came off,
It was about 100 off of the
Yeah, it's
sewer
a little-
line, and then about 200 or another 150 off
Right,
of the water side.
and at this point was still estimates.
Yeah.
So we're still feeling that out, and we don't have a full year under our belt yet.
Got it. Yeah, I was just, for some reason, expecting a much larger jump, but, I mean, $100,000 is a large jump, but,
So I also had a question on the fees. The line that says sewer rents, I gather is the sewer part of the water bill. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure.
Commercial and residential.
Yep. So if I look collectively at our revenue for water and sewer, I'm seeing roughly 40% of it is paid by our users in Beacon, meaning homeowners, the ones that get, billed, and commercial. Another 20% are hauler fees, another 20% is the correctional facility, and another 20% is the town of Fishkill. Is that a reasonable ballpark?
Haulers are 33%.
Well, it's 33% of sewer, but if I add water and sewer
Oh,
together.
okay, you're adding them together.
Right,
Okay.
I'm kind of looking at them collectively.
Okay.
Right, makes sense?
Mm-hmm.
Right, because haulers aren't on the water side, just on the sewer side, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
It offsets the sewer budget only.
Water and sewer's coming up.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Ed,
yeah.
you would have-
No, I just find it instructive that, both water and sewer are facilities that have the good fortune to be able to spread our capital expenditure across other users, and that's just really helpful for the community.
It's not just capital, it would be operating
Yeah.
too, and that is why when we did comparisons, our rate was significantly lower than surrounding communities because we did have the prisons, and we're also able to build town of Fishkill, as well as having the haulers. So that our sewer rate was untouchable.
Yeah.
And I did that review in 2015, and I could do it today, and I'm sure it would still reflect the same.
Yeah, it also doesn't hurt that the other users are charged higher rates.
Or what?
Like, for instance, if you're in the town of Fishkill getting Beacon Water, you're paying a higher rate.
Yes,
than
out-of-town
if you
fee.
you're paying the out-of-town rate rather than the city of Beacon rate. Okay, thank you.
I'll just say I appreciate your philosophy and the seriousness that you take this job in keeping the Hudson clean.
Thank you. It's very important, isn't it? It's
I
key. And if you look at it that way, then it's a pleasure to continue trying to make things better there at the plant. And it's something that you're providing a key service to the city. That's excellent work in my book, right?
Yeah,
But
to the
it's a
city
team
and,
effort.
and to all of our neighbors up and down the river.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Thanks.
All right, Aquaman. So we have Ed Balicki, our Superintendent of Water and Sewers.
Yeah, he's an old-timer. You can make fun of him and poke at him as much as you like.
I used to do this department and the wastewater, so I
Yep.
cover a lot when I would sit up here. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me. Again, I'm Edward Balicki. I'm the superintendent of the City of Beacon Water and Sewer Department. I'm here to present the 2024 budget and also give you an overview of activities that happened in 2023 and are currently still going on. So the department itself is responsible for our 3 reservoirs, our 2 municipal wells, 55 miles of transmission and distribution piping, that being the water pipes that move the water throughout the city and from our reservoirs to the city, 580 fire hydrants, the roughly 2,500 valves, addition to one more this week, so 2,501. The 4,500 water meters, which we'll be discussing a little later on, 1 water booster station that's specific for Helen Court, 3 water storage tanks, and then also the sanitary sewer pipes, as Dave mentioned. He's responsible for the plant, but we are responsible for the pipes and the pump stations that move the sewage throughout the city to the plant. Those 3 pump stations are West Main, Fishkill Avenue, Monell, Church Street, which is a very small pump station, and Fairways Lane, which was most recently adopted in 2021. 1,300 manholes, again, estimate, and then the various facilities, the water plant, and external properties. The department consists of 12 staff, myself, the two operators, 1 chief operator, 1 water plant operator, and then the road crew. I apologize. We did add 1 staff member this year, which transferred in from the wastewater treatment plant. Originally, we had 11. We moved our staffing up to 12, which will eventually lead to an additional, that one of the road crew staff will be transferring to the water plant to begin to train to become a new operator. And then the other activities that the department is responsible for, kind of cover that a little bit, is the sanitary sewer mains, cleaning of those sewer mains, flushing of fire hydrants, lawns. The water plant operators are responsible for water quality sampling, testing of the water, make sure that we meet or exceed all water quality standards. Performing regulatory reports. And also the staff, I'm going to jump a little bit, is we work closely, and I know Mickey kind of covered this a lot. We work closely with other departments. With Highway, staff was assisting with the new railings at Madam Brett. We installed the new water fountains at Memorial Park and Green Street Park. Most recently, if you saw the activity out at City Hall here, they installed new drainage throughout the parking lot. We expanded Riverfront Park this year. There was a small section to the left that had been overgrown, and staff cut all that down and opened up a small little seating area, viewing area. It's actually a nice little quiet spot to the left of the main park there. The other things that they've done, obviously water main breaks, water main repairs, homeowner complaints, responding to various calls of any need, from leaking water meters to leaking pipes. And then also, we assisted, again, go back to Highway, we assist with the, milling and paving, snow removal, and we've also become part of Mark's recreation staff, and we work well with at the various parks, whatever's needed. Again, going back to the water fountains, also the University Central Camp. We've become the pool committee at the beginning of the year, where we clean the pool for Mark and get that operational for the season. And some of the initiatives that we've undertaken for this year, which was budgeted for 2023, was the lead service line inventory, which is an EPA requirement, which mandates that we have to inventory all this, what would be the customer service line, so the line that connects the water main to the house. We have to inventory that pipe material. Generally speaking, they just call it the lead service line. It doesn't mean that it is a lead service line, but that's what they want us to look for. So we started that along with our consulting engineers from WSP. Excuse me. We also, one of the other things that we undertook, it wasn't really overly a budget initiative that would have been seen, was we did a deep dive into cybersecurity, which was pressed on us by, that's not a fair way of saying it, it was a requirement from the New York State Department of Health and Homeland Security. So we performed an assessment on our systems. We looked at vulnerabilities, repaired those vulnerabilities, and made ourselves stronger. We installed new cameras, separated operating systems throughout. So at no point does our process control ever touch our business systems. So I can never email from my laptop to our SCADA. It doesn't work like that. They're very different, separate. Our SCADA is non-forward facing, has no internet to it. So that was a really good project that we did, and very quietly.
Can you explain SCADA for people that don't know that?
Sorry, I tend to start rambling. So our SCADA is System Controlled Data Acquisition. It's our computer program and computer monitoring that runs the water plant. Not just the water plant, but it sees almost all of our external sources. So we have units that are out that are called RTUs that are collecting data at various spots within our system and communicating back to the water plant. So when I became superintendent, roughly 2015, we didn't have any of that. We had paper charts. Staff would drive around every day, spending hours every day just driving to these spots, taking readings, recordings, making adjustments. Now we get better real-time data and real-time information. It communicates, pretty frequently throughout the day. Roughly every 5 minutes, there's communication back and forth. So the SCADA is monitoring all that, and then it allows us to make changes to how we process. Some of it's automated, some of it's still manual. And then going back to some other stuff that we've done is the Fishkill Avenue, Teller Avenue, Fishkill Avenue Rehabilitation Project, which was where we've looked at the project as a whole. We went out and we purchased some valve structures, which are the manholes and valve boxes that we've been working ahead of time. Just recently this week, or starting last week, we installed a new water valve and water main extension down Fowler Avenue, which was something that we've been planning on doing for several years, but this kind of project moved it along. So in the event that we had the opportunity to fund a new water main down Fowler, because it's an undersized main, the extension is already in Teller, so we don't have to dig up the brand new street once it's repaved. And on the big side, honestly, We've recently completed the Mount Beacon Pocket Rehabilitation Project. That was roughly $3 million. By rehabilitating the pocket, we captured 80 to 100,000 gallons of water a day that was lost through leakage. There will always be, the leakage actually never really goes away because it is earthen. So there are cracks and crevices. It's not like we didn't drain it and line it and seal everything. And then the small pocket is connected to a brick building, which is like, it's not necessarily impervious to the water. But by capturing almost all that seepage, you know, we've retained roughly 30 million gallons of water a year. Whereas Mount Beacon, when it's full and not running over, is 158 or 125 million gallons of water. Also this year, we purchased a new sewer jetter, which will replace the 1998 sewer truck. So eventually our blue rusted box truck that you'll see us out and about will be, that'll be going away. I also worked with our WSP, again, our consulting engineers, on the Melzinga project, which will be hopefully kicking off this year. And we did apply for a grant for almost full funding of the construction of that project. 2024 projects and initiatives. We'll be kicking off the West Main Street Pump Station. That's been going on for several years now. We've been negotiating with Metro North for acquisition, not really acquisition, an easement on their property, which was granted. The project's been submitted and approved, and there's just engineering is just finalizing terms with Metro North regarding access to the property. We'll also be, again, coming up a little later on, we'll be discussing the meter project, which we'll be bringing back to you, which was discussed a little over a year ago. And then major items, most of my budget stayed, there was some minor increases across the board just for some inflation, but the major big ticket items is overtime is increased to accommodate for the lead service line inventory. We're envisioning either working with, as Central Hudson moves forward with their gas main replacements on certain streets. We don't want to just go out and start digging up nice streets for no reason, but streets that are going to be either milled and paved or streets that are going to have new gas mains installed. We can work with in those projects to field identify the pipes. So the way the lead service line inventory is required, there's what they call the customer side, and then there's the utility side, even though that's not how it works here in the city. So there's inside in your property, there's a valve out in a yard, that's called the curb stop. So we need to inventory from the curb stop to the meter and from the curb stop to the main. And there's some, in some cases there's unknowns, and that's where we're going to look for the unknowns to use the overtime, you know, on top of the regular work that the staff are doing. They go out and start digging up all these extra, and daylighting all these extra holes was going to be difficult, so we look to increase the overtime there. And I can answer questions about that as
How do you know when there's knowns without digging?
So in 2020, which is, in the year 2000, the city code requires the laying of copper pipe. So we have a nice starting date at that point, which isn't great. Like the further back in time that happened would have been much better, but that's the best point we have. Mm-hmm. The other thing is that there's been other water mains that have been replaced in the city throughout the years, and we can look at that water main material and knowing that type of material that's there, and that leads us to then being copper. And there's some statistical analysis that could be looked at, but for the most part, if it's what's called a ductile iron main, which is the newer pipe material, that will have copper going to it. Any construction any houses that were built 2000 to now will all have copper to it. Okay. It's going to be the unknowns. It's going to be more of the older areas that still have cast iron pipes that would be the questionable.
Mm-hmm. When did they stop using lead pipes for water? You know?
It varies because there's some spots upstate, Rochester being one of them, but there's like I've seen their map, and there's some prevalent spots where it was put in. But as for when they stopped, I'm not sure, because there is actually in the New York State plumbing, in some of the New York State plumbing codes, there's still reference to lead. Mm-hmm. So I'm not sure when they actually decided to stop using it.
Yeah. Thanks.
And just the next item is much what Dave had mentioned, is the increase in chemical costs. We've seen 133% in our chemical costs. Mostly that's on the chlorine side.
Just to quickly go back to the lead service line inventory,
Mhm.
if you are curious if your property's already been checked or not, is that information that's available, or we're not releasing that until we're done?
No, it's not available. It will, no, as it goes along, if we find lead, we have to notify, once the inventory is developed, there is a notification, there's a lot, right now, we have to establish our inventory by the end of next year. And part of the meter upgrade project is the contractor that'll be doing the meter and the MXU installs, they're doing a pipe investigation as well. So they're going to photograph, tell us what type the pipe, what size the pipe is, the material of the pipe. So coming into your house, we'll know that definitely.
Ed, do you think we could get a presentation when the lead service line inventory is completed?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. Because there's more to it. Just right now is just the inventory part. So on our end, luckily, the state and the government has provided us with a template to use. And it's a drop-down template, and as you provide information in one thing, it starts populating other phases of the cells throughout the program. So stuff that we've been doing ourselves ahead of the meter program, we've been populating as it goes. We've got roughly 200 or so of the house or the properties here in the city. There we go.
Thanks.
To follow up on my, go ahead. Oh, go ahead, Ren.
Are you still going through your increases?
No, that was it. Those were the two major ones.
I was just looking at the administration fee to general in 8310. That looks like my quick math isn't great, but it looks like a 20% increase.
Sue will answer that. That's our fee to the general city line.
There's a number of things, including the city administrator's time, my staff's time. Excuse me. My staff handles the water and sewer billing. So water and sewer billing questions, final reads, stuff like that. So our time, which our salaries are located in the general fund, needs to be with this overhead allocation charged to the water and sewer fund. There's also this municipal building. A bit of this is charged to water and sewer. Liability insurance all resides within the general fund, but it's charged back to water and sewer on a percentage rate.
Understood. And so the increase from 2022 to 2024?
That would be salaried lines, dependent if for instance, the 1 year, the city administrator spent a lot more time on sewer contracts, so his salary was charged back a little bit more. So we analyze each person and how much time they're spending, and also the rising costs of everything.
And we also have really major capital projects come in. You're going to learn more in a few minutes about, or learn additional things about the meter upgrade project that's going to be starting in January. We also have the Melzinga project going, which raises the spillway of that major dam. So we've been putting in grant time, attorney time, regulatory stuff, and each year we adjust that based on what we think the workload is going to be.
Thank you.
And this year for both water and sewer, there's a lot of projects going on. We got a lot in the works, and Ed is working. He didn't mention he's working on an easement for a replacement of the tank at Pocket. Is that what you call it?
Yeah, it originally was the Mount Beacon tank, but we slowly transitioning to the Pocket tank. Right now, if you go up Pocket Road to where the Pocket is in Mount Beacon tank, we're looking to replace that due to the fact that the city granted an overhead easement to Central Hudson, which is their main transmission lines. We can't construct within that easement. So we did all the survey work. We created a topographical map of the area, and just by creating a diagram of the tank, we were floating it around. We met with New York State Parks, and we're working on an easement onto their land to construct part of the tank.
And then we're going to be working with the attorneys and the city engineer on the bid for the West Main pump station and Force Main. So there's like an incredible amount of work going on the next year.
And, just so it's actually important to allocate effectively the time that administration spends on water and sewer, because think about the funding for it, right? That's going to come out of user fees, and 60% of that's going to be paid by non-Beacon residents. Whereas if it stays in the general fund, because we haven't done our job of allocating effectively, that's going to get paid by property taxes, right? So it's actually important to do it right.
So how far would the Pocket Road tank be moved?
Instead of it being, if you walk up the road to the left, it'll be moved to the right. So the road will kind of stay similar to where it is.
So the same elevation?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, we can't go up any higher due to the steepness of the ground. Also, it's predominantly rock there, which
I thought we talked last year about it maybe going to a higher elevation.
we wanted to, but the easement's 150 foot wide, which really hampers our use of the property. And it's written, Nick's had the opportunity to review it. It's written extremely strict. Like they use the general term structure, which pretty much was broad to anything.
Right, doghouse.
I see we get water from other governments.
That's well 8. We purchase
And
water.
that's the well. And I've noticed that it was about 580,000, then it went down to 380,000, now it's back up to 480,000 projected. Is that based on our water usage, and that's kind of how we estimate it from year to year?
Yes. Yes. Originally, though, like when we first renegotiated the way the contract is written is that we could purchase water up to 1 million gallons a day for a year. So when I would originally do the budget, I was put in the budget the full amount, assuming that.
Which was 700,000.
Yes.
And then I would take it down till I got to a number that seemed more reasonable.
Because in our safe yield and how we calculate, and our safe yield is how much safe water we have at our disposal. That well is included in our day-to-day productions.
And right now, since well 2 is down, we're drawing quite a bit from well 8.
Those are the wells in Fishkill?
Yeah, our wells are like across the street from the 84 Diner, and then the Village of Fishkill well is located off of Route 9 over in the town of Fishkill, behind the old Duchess Mall, behind the old mall. There we go.
To follow up on my earlier question to David, just kind of looking to the future and these big water events, is there kind of anything on your horizon, maybe not for even the 2024 capital plan, but anything you're thinking about that as a city council we should just be aware of right now?
Well, going backwards a little bit, the city has invested, I believe, $12 million in our sanitary sewer system to correct deficiencies that were in it. Aging pipe, narrowed pipes that didn't, and what I mean by narrowed is like you'd have a 10-inch pipe going to a 6-inch pipe and then back to it, so you were creating these bottlenecks. Some of the work that you saw was completed last year was the Fishkill Avenue, Hannah Lane sewer project, where it was a known deficiency because it was flat through there, so we put bigger pipe in, and by going down Hannah Lane, we created better pitch, which created better velocity. And Chris touched on it a little bit with the reservoirs. Mount Beacon aesthetically wasn't the prettiest, right? It did need some cleaning, but structurally it was fine. But the major proponent of that project was to meet these new storm events. So there's a specific storm event that they get asked to design to, and it's a real storm event. I'll be somewhat incorrect. I'm just guessing. I can't recall the numbers 100%, but I believe it's like 36 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. That could be wrong, but it's a substantial amount of rain. But it's a registered storm event. So the work that we did at Mount Beacon was to make the reservoir could handle that type of 50% of that storm event. And then what we're doing at Melzinga is going to be the same project. So we are looking. I know you were asking more about the sewer plant and stuff, but we are looking at, meeting some of these ever-changing world around us. One of the things that as you ask, we continue to look at our sewer system. We do have the West Main Street pump station and force main coming online. That's aging infrastructure. We should probably eventually looking at changing some of our storm system. upgrading our storm system to better capture runoff and not like just, get it directed out into the streams, into the river.
Sorry, can you say that last part again?
I would just say that the better, if we're going to look at other stuff, is also looking at our storm system. Like, we have a, not in the packet here, we recently repaired a section of storm pipe that had collapsed at the intersection of West Center and Dinan, right? So there's sections of the city that are old.
Yeah. Sure.
And just from old, we have water mains that are 100 years old.
I thought I heard you say something about the stormwater running into the creeks and.
Well, the stormwater isn't meant to go to the sewer plant. It's supposed to be discharged either to the Fishkill Creek or the Hudson River. So that's what I'm saying. If we're gonna, just as a broad scope answer, that's what I was looking at. It was like if we're gonna, not just fixing sewer, but also looking at if any aging storm systems that we have.
I just want to point out that storm drains are also Mickey.
Yes.
You mentioned something special Helen Court has.
They have their own booster station.
Booster station.
There's not a. Our water system works on gravity pressure. So the water comes out of the water plant, goes to our storage tanks that are at elevation, and that elevated pressure is what gets the water out to your houses. The residents at Helen Court, they are above our pressure zone. So we have just a dedicated booster station that pressurizes the water to get it up to their
Where
properties.
does it live? Where's this booster station?
Just to the right when you pull, there's like that one blue house that's not.
Right there.
That's not there. It's
Yeah.
it's right behind them.
Yep.
All right, okay.
Yeah, it's because Helen Court rises up the hill, right? That's what's going on.
Way up there.
Yep.
I meant to ask you which storm did we get 36 inches in 24 hours?
It wasn't here. It's a registered storm event that it wasn't here in New York.
Oh, okay.
I'm not sure the exact location.
Okay. We had a few days that felt like that this year.
Yeah, it's I don't know if it was a hurricane or like one of those storm events that they saw in Texas several years ago, or in Houston, where it was just a train coming in. But it was a specific storm event that they said that you have to design these reservoirs, your spillways to meet.
We did lose a road early on when I was here in September 2021.
Pocket Road.
Pocket Road.
We lost Pocket, and we would have lost a neighborhood if Mickey's guys hadn't been out all night keeping it clean, keeping the culverts clean. So.
Yeah, that was a little bit my question, where like those instances where the storm drain sort of meets the creek, and if we're considering, or if this is out of jurisdiction, things like strategic plantings or other ways that you can slow down the water as it meets the creek, either at Fishkill Creek or along the Pocket Dam line, or if there are sort of like alternative storm management methods that are outside of like concrete infrastructure.
One of the ideas.
We're really in Mickey's purview right now. We've gone back to storm drains, which are under.
Like the riparian border, maybe, something like that.
Let me suggest if we want to do stuff like that, maybe we do it not in budget.
Yeah.
Because
we got a meaty agenda.
Right. But, we could take that ideas and kind of bring them back, if that would be okay.
Yes, I apologize. I was just trying to answer the Brent's question. Or Molly's question, sorry.
Thanks for being ready to dig in, but yeah, another day.
I know Mickey would have said we work really diligently to keep these systems clean, because if they're not clean and it backs up, that's when the water goes in an uncontrolled manner and erodes land and gets into people's houses. And we've seen it, and they do a great job cleaning that system and repairing that system so it conveys the water before that damage happens. Right? That's what you meant to say. You got to use the mic. You jumped in it.
All right. I'm going to let you say it, but remember, I was trying to get you not to.
Well, no, it's just one thing. I mean, obviously, we live at the base of a mountain, so it's very hard to control all the water from the top of the mountain coming down the hill. So that's where we kind of run into some challenges. That's all. I mean, I understand what you're saying, Paloma. It's to try to control that as it's going into somewhere, but when you get a storm like we've had in that last September, the volume of water is coming down off the mountain, and like I say, if something gets blocked, it picks its own path.
Right.
So you got to try to figure out where it's going, how to get it back to where it's supposed to be.
Yeah, I guess, I mean, looking at the whole system and the whole watershed, even though we can't control all of it. But anyway.
Okay.
Cool. So we're good on budget now, I think. You guys can head out if you want, and Ed's got another presentation. So Ed, can you just give a little background on the, thank you. And you know, Mickey said you're only as good as your team, and I have to say, as I bring our department heads before you, I think you get a sense of just how great a team I get to work with every day. We really have an extraordinary group of dedicated professional people that are our department heads, and they lead a great workforce, and I just appreciate all of you being here. Thanks.
Thank you. I always tell Chris I'm not the greatest wordsmith, but as much like Mickey said, I have a great team, I have a great staff, and it's amazing what they get done on a day-to-day basis. So I'd like to thank them.
All right, so we're going to talk a little bit about the water meter upgrades, which you had approved in a capital plan, and then we had started implementation, and we asked Ed and Core and Maine to come back. We have Mike Johnson from Core and Maine to give an update with Ed.
Hi, good evening. Michael Johnson with Core and Maine. Thanks so much for having me here tonight. Sitting through this, it's interesting. It seems like you guys are really far ahead of the game. You guys are really taking the initiative here and making things happen, and it's good to see. That being said, about a year ago, I was here talking to you about the meter initiative, and the whole purpose of that was to ensure that you're accurately capturing the consumption from your residents, right? And being able to compare that accurately against what's being produced by Ed and his team, and making sure that you have a nice, tight water system. So the current state or current process right now is to go out and read your meters using a drive-by system. You have a technician that has a radio transceiver in their vehicle. They drive around, they collect those reads on a quarterly basis. Now we'll be moving forward to an AMI system, which stands for Advanced Metering Infrastructure, which basically means it's fixed base. You're going to be able to make data-driven decisions based on near real-time information. So you'll be able to collect those meter reads, collect alarms instantly. You'll be able to log in from the main office, from a technician's tablet or phone, and view consumption and view alerts and be able to go out and tackle those problems so you can be more proactive instead of reactive. So currently you have your infrastructure already installed out at Mount Beacon and Howland Tank, and now the next step would be to install the meters and the radios. Most of your meters are pretty new, so you only need about 300 of them. They are currently in your possession, but you'll need about 4,500 transmitters, and you have about half of those on hand. So in the coming months, you'll be hearing a lot from Core and Maine and Vepo Solutions to make sure that your residents are scheduling appointments so that we can get in and do those change-outs and get you on that new system.
Yeah, so to reiterate, we brought this to you a little over a year ago. There was a lag in the supply. Obviously, there were some computer chip components that took some time to get out and start bringing in the inventory. So as Mike mentioned, we have about half the MXUs, what I think he called it the radio portion or transmitter portion. Yep. That's the major change out of this project. It's how the meters are actually going to be talking. Because currently, right now, as he said, it's a drive-by system, these new MXUs, and there are some already in the system, as it's been about 3 or 4 years now that the newer MXUs have been out. So every time we have to do an MXU change out, it's already going into one of these newer style MXUs, and they are talking to the new antennas that the base stations that are in the system.
And you have in your packet a letter that's dated October. We've been working on it since October. It'll be going out in January when we're ready to deploy this. This letter is also in Spanish, thanks to Dave Tavernier, who
Yes, David.
translated for us. And as we get closer to the kickoff of that, we'll be using every communication avenue we have, the website, social media. The letter will be going out, and we will do a call. You're focusing on which ward again?
The first ward.
First ward.
Yes.
Are you using the new ward boundaries or the old ward boundaries?
I don't know.
We're trying to get the
That's a
new.
really
we
good
need
question.
I don't think they're using ward boundaries.
Okay.
Well,
we
as we,
are. Yeah.
The map,
They were-
the
to-
old map is included in the
I
packet.
asked because the old map, and as of January, there will be, not a huge modification, but some modifications to the ward
The
boundaries.
city
so.
engineer is updating that map now for us.
so,
So we'll see if it's ready.
so, can you scroll down for a minute? Just go so I can see it better. Thank you. Yeah, I kind of well, I personally picked the Ward 1 area because it incorporated some of the, what we call the willows. So it was a little bit more denser population, the residential area. When we kick it off in January, it's going to be more of a slow roll. As Mike mentioned, Core and Main is they're our supplier that we purchase our meters from. They have a contractor called Vetbo, which will be handling the scheduling. It's mentioned in the packet, and that's who they'll be scheduling through. So we're going to kind of slow roll it. Obviously, it's January. The weather is not going to be great. We're coming after the holiday season, so it's going to be if we can get 10 appointments a week, and we can build on that and build on that and build on that, and by the time the weather hopefully turns in the spring, there'll be more than one technician moving forward, and then we'll go from 10 to 20 to 30 appointments a week to do this. And as mentioned earlier during the budget, they'll be doing the internal pipe verification for the lead service line.
Yeah, so the key here during this project is the response from the residents. So the more responses we get, the more folks we'll have in the field doing the installations. We'll try to throttle that back a little bit at first, just to make sure that we're getting the data that you want, that we're doing the lead line identification, and everything is fitting into WSP's form correctly, and making sure that you guys are happy with the results before we kind of ramp up and try to get more folks to schedule appointments.
So I just want to touch on that because I kind of glazed over it earlier. Mike's team and Vetbo have been communicating with WSP as WSP is working with us to develop the lead service line and populating the inventory for us, so that they're working on a clean, seamless communication point. That way, as Vetbo is uploading information, WSP will have access to it. So it's nice to have the two entities working together to get the two projects done.
My understanding is that residents themselves will be able to see their own water usage as well.
Yes, so as part of the project, they'll have a customer portal.
And will that be available to them as soon as they make this appointment and have it, or is that a later point of
It'll
the
be a
project?
later point of the project, yeah.
Okay. Do you know yet, will it be online next year? Is there a rough date for that yet or not yet?
We don't have a rough date. It's usually towards the end of the deployment phase that we'll implement that portal.
So it depends how the deployment goes.
And then we typically like the city or the municipality to set up a couple of accounts internally so that you guys get used to it, and then you can communicate the availability of that portal to your residents however you feel fit, whether it's posting it on your website or putting it in the paper, or sending out a flyer along with their most recent bill.
And we've been working with Census Analytics, which is Census, which manufactures the water meters. They have an analytics team, is also communicating with our billing software provider to make sure that all the information gets integrated. So it's not just the technicians going out and doing the Amex use. There's a lot of cooperation going on between multiple people, multiple entities here.
We want to make sure that it's nice and smooth and an easy transition, and all the data is passed back and forth to the appropriate vendors easily, right?
But one of the goals, Molly, is that real-time monitoring of water use. So if somebody had a water pipe that burst in the basement and they were unaware of it, We actually can set the system up so it gives alerts to our staff to say, hey, we saw this amazing spike over the last 24 hours. Maybe you should check, or is somebody at the house, you know?
If a resident signs up for the portal and they go in there and they submit their information like cell phone number or email address, they can automate that so that they get those alerts. So you kind of put that into their hands to take ownership of that.
But like now, if we had that circumstance, we don't find out until the next quarter's billing, and by then you've run up thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yeah, we can, like, you know, if we were doing our reads today, everything would be fine. And, you know, 5 minutes after he drives by, your pipes burst. We won't know. Like, if you're not there, you went on vacation, you wouldn't, no one would know until you got back.
Or just a simple toilet leak,
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, yes. So yeah. Yes.
Toilet running.
Yeah.
Yes.
I really like the dashboard and the tools available to the public. I think sometimes having access to data helps you, just automatically helps you make good decisions. Like you look at your daily usage and be like, whoa, okay, or, we don't have to take that many showers every day. But we talked, when you were here last time, I asked a question about whether the app that's available to the public could notify them when we have a drought warning or a drought watch, and that they should be taking extra care to conserve water, and whether it could even put in benchmarks for water usage. The last part is something I added tonight. But anyway, I'm wondering if any progress was made on that, or if that's still something that you can deploy, because it sounded like it was something that was doable last time.
So there's a notifications box within the portal. So if you wanted to communicate something to your residents, say that there's a drought or a boil water advisory, you could post it in that box. In terms of setting up thresholds, the resident can do that as well, or the property owner can do that
really?
as well. They can set up a threshold, and so that they know if they're approaching a certain amount of consumption, they'll get an alert.
That's great. That's great. Thanks.
And in terms of the work of actually showing up at people's homes, is my assumption correct that you do not, like the homeowner themselves or the primary renter does not have to be at home, but if they work during the window that you have Monday through Friday, they just need to arrange someone else to be there in their stead? Doesn't have to be them who's at the home?
It doesn't necessarily have to be the property owner, but I think they have to be at least 18 years of age.
Okay, so no.
Yeah. So someone does have to be there.
Right, yeah, sorry, that clarifying was that doesn't have to be the property owner who has to be there, but someone at least 18 years of age.
Is the idea that this letter is the first that the whole city will become aware, or is the idea that the mayor will do a call, or we'll put things on our website
It would be a combination of both. I think we just target the ward itself, and then do the call, do the letter. We'll also put it on social media. We'll talk about it at additional meetings. When we're ready to go, we'll make sure internally we're prepared. I know that somebody, calling somebody's house, inevitably somebody's going to call the police department and say, is this for real? So we need to make sure we're all, as a city staff, aware of it as well.
Yeah, on the letter, I'm wondering if we could clarify some of the language in it. And maybe, Nick, this is a question for you, but any failure to schedule the appointment within the 30-day time frame is, I think, a slightly confusing phrase. I think it would be helpful if we either said, have your appointment scheduled by this date, or have reached out to schedule your appointment by this date. And I know that when we discussed and implemented this law, that we said 30 days was reasonable and 250 is reasonable, but knowing that sometimes it can take a minute for people to catch up with their mail or realize they've missed a phone call, I just want to make sure we're enforcing this as clearly and fairly as possible.
Okay, noted. We'll look at that again, work with that on some changes.
Well, as Mike mentioned, one of the biggest, and Mike and Rob and the the back. They have the most experiences. One of the things one of the hurdles that they've met in other communities was not having that enforcement. So I understand what you're saying, but it's very, very important that we have that to move the project forward. Because even with that, and even however we change it, there's still going to be that 1-2% that they'll just pay the fine. Like that's just how we run into it all the time with even now.
All set?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thanks again for having me.
One last question, Ed. It sounds like if you're starting, thank you, Mike. If you're starting with Ward 1, is there a way that the other wards can get notified before those letters start getting out? Just so, because I'm sure I'll get emails and calls about this when you do get to Ward 4. So could I just get a notification before you guys hit my ward?
Yeah.
We would roll out.
We picked Ward 1 because of some of the housing structure that's there, and because of the fact that we would like to,
He wanted to test it on those pesky residents
Yes.
of Willow Street.
Yes, it's more of a.
If you can get to that,
We
you
actually
can
are
get
going to
to
ask
anyone.
Molly to go door to door. We didn't tell her yet.
Yeah,
She's very good at that.
we did a similar, or where I live, I live in a Dutchess County district, so but it was easier in my area because we just did our neighborhood as a whole, right? So that the company went out, canvassed the entire, and then we had the same thing. We had, in this case, we had the 3 notices and then fine. So, but through the population and how we're set up here, I looked at the housing, the density, and how we discussed it, like slow rolling, thank you, about the pesky customers, and then get a feel for it, and then start ramping up. Instead of trying to blanket the city, it just wasn't gonna be feasible for VEPO, for Core and Main, and us to do it right.
Great.
Okay.
It's really exciting.
Yeah.
Thank you.
This is good stuff. Thank you, Ed. Thanks, Rob.
So, you all saw the parts of the budget, Dave said the forgotten piece. It's like, when you don't have the money and you're a poor city, you don't do the stuff that's under the ground, and so nobody thinks that it will matter. And we've been doing this pretty consistently for 30 years, which is why we are where we are. We are in pretty amazing shape in terms of our underlying infrastructure in the city. And this project will help that along, but, our dams are getting redone, a lot of the wastewater treatment plant. I remember reports saying that our wastewater treatment plant was at the end of its useful life, and instead of kind of rethinking it, we just started putting in new sections of it, one little piece at a time, and it makes a huge difference. So, thank you all.
Thank you, Ed.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Ed.
So, Mayor, you have online Sarah Morris, our Director of Human Resources, for the next discussion.
Thank you. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Sarah, you there?
Thanks, guys.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Go for it.
Oh, great. How are you? How is everyone tonight?
So far, so good.
Good. Okay, so before you, there are 2 updated policies, one being workplace violence prevention and also sexual harassment. So we'll start off with workplace violence prevention. Just to give you a little history, back in 2006, the state passed the Workplace Violence Prevention Act, and then in 2009, Department of Labor implemented regulations to accompany the act. Pursuant to those regulations, the city was required to develop and implement a workplace violence program, which was to prevent and minimize risks. And in 2010, the council did pass and approve a workplace violence program. But since then, there have been updates in the regulations. And so before you, the policy for tonight is a comprehensive program that brings us into compliance. Some of the updates from the Department of Labor has been the definition of our levels of workplace violence, our requirements to have a policy statement, which is listed in Appendix 1. We're supposed to be sending out employee surveys, which we'll be doing, creating a safety committee, which we actually have already did that last year. And I'm proud to say that since we created a safety committee, we've had a representative from each location and department that is on the committee. And we were already visiting each location and each building to do a safety walkthrough, to do a risk evaluation. So even though our prevention policy, our program was not up to date and in compliance, we already had things in motion. Part of the updated program addresses annual evaluations and then the training program. So after this exercise of going through and updating our policy, I'm pleased to say that we only had some minor changes to mitigate any potential risks. I can share them offline, but we are in a good position in terms of security for our buildings. So that's kind of a high-level overview of the updated workplace violence program. Any questions?
Just if I could add some context, again, for the people that are tuning in, we didn't have an HR department before the mayor came on, and then there was a part-time department. So Sarah came on in March of 2022 and has been methodically going through all of our systems to make sure that we're in compliance. And this is part of that effort to bring us current with all of the regulations that exist. And we were trying to do this prior to December because we're doing our annual training, and we're supposed to have these in place prior to those annual trainings.
Sarah, has the employee survey gone out to employees yet? Do you know?
Not yet, because this is part of the new
Okay,
program.
so that's part of what we'll be doing. That great. Yeah, I think both for this and somewhat too for the sexual harassment prevention. I'm just curious, and this is not something that I need an answer for right now, but just whether it's worth, at least at the city council level, if not the public, just to kind of understand what are the things that our staff members are facing, that the public is facing, just kind of get some trends or anything that we should be aware of. I think as you gather the data that is required by the state, if there's something that you think the city council would benefit from learning as well, I'd certainly be interested.
Sure. I can say in terms of general trends, there are high-risk occupations such as retail or transportation. In more recent years, teachers and school staff have seen an increase in work violence cases. Municipal workers have always been a high-risk potential for high-risk workplace violence just due to public access. But what's interesting is, in looking in the last 5 years, because of COVID, there have been an uptick in workplace violence cases, not specific to Beacon, but just in general across the board, because of employees who were verbally assaulted or spit on, or sometimes physically attacked because they were enforcing COVID-19 mitigation practices. But specific to Beacon, I'm pleased to say that we do have a secure workplace. We are providing annual training and enforcing our policies.
I had a few sort of technical questions and a note. The sexual harassment document clearly defines council members as employees. I assume that's true of the violence prevention document as well. I just wasn't sure.
Yes.
And also, I wanted to note on the violence prevention document, there are a number of binary pronouns used. If I believe it's general city policy to replace them with they, them pronouns. They're on page 5, 6, 10, and 11. But I'm sure you could find them easily. And then another question, I've noticed sort of definitions throughout that the city will respect privacy and confidentiality to the greatest extent possible. And I just would love to understand a little bit more about sort of the limitations of confidentiality in these processes.
So in terms of investigating complaints, we have to keep names confidential until we can't. When we're reporting this information on our PESH log or If we're discussing in our safety committee workplace incidents, I will keep the names confidential. So in terms of that, that's when it would be kept out. The name would be kept out of reports.
Is there some sort of like liability piece here that requires this clause? Or?
I mean, I can get back to you on that in terms of what our liability.
Go ahead, Nick.
I was going to say, no, I don't know, but I can certainly discuss with Sarah and speak to one of our labor attorneys and get a response back.
My question is along similar lines of confidentiality, and it's probably just how I'm reading the sentence, but on 11 under law enforcement reporting procedures, there's a phrase about reporting any workplace violence incidents that may be criminal or domestic violence of domestic violence nature to the city attorney, city administrator. So just wanted to understand what does that mean? If an employee is reporting a domestic violence incidents, but they're not a part of any kind of workplace violence, I just want to make sure that that wouldn't be misconstrued, that their confidentiality would be broken and they would have to, that would have to be reported to the city administrator. Do you understand what I'm asking?
Can you say that again?
So, do you see the part that I'm talking about, page 11?
I see on page 11 under law enforcement reporting procedures, yes.
Right. So, I mean, I know that this is pertaining to if there is a workplace violence incident. But could it be misread, and could someone think that if they are reporting domestic violence that they've experienced, that then that would be reported to the city attorney, the city administrator, and human resources?
Yes, I can discuss this with Nick offline.
Thank you. You see where I'm going with that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
I do think we qualify that as saying it's workplace violence that is domestic violence related. So it's not just domestic violence that happens elsewhere. It would be like a circumstance where, a partner came to the workplace and committed domestic violence at the workplace.
Sure.
I see.
Yeah,
That's
and
the way
I see that. I hate to think that someone would misread that, and then their confidentiality, someone else's confidentiality would be broken. But
Yeah, so maybe it's just a matter of clarifying that it's occurring in the workplace, and we can. Yep.
Sorry, I have a question. The workplace violence, all of this information, it gives the definition of an employee, but I was wondering if this policy protects committee members as well that volunteer to help serve the city if there was an incident that were to happen while they were doing their committee work.
It would extend, yes.
Okay, yeah, because it didn't seem really clear in the definitions of that, but I just wanted to make sure that the people that are doing work for the city are protected.
Okay.
Sort of going off of Ren's question, this is in the sexual harassment document on page 6. It's defining boundaries around workplace and non-workplace harassment. And I just wasn't clear from reading this sentence if it was referring to it says calls, texts, emails, and social media usage by employees or covered individuals can constitute unlawful workplace harassment even if they occur away from the workplace premises, on personal devices, or during non-work hours. is that referring only to incidents on social media, calls, texts, emails? Or is that referring to any other work done, any other instance outside of the workplace?
So this policy extends to outside the workplace as well. So if there's a connection that you have with another employee, for example, let's say you and a coworker go out somewhere and something inappropriate happens, it would be covered under our policy because the reference is that you were both under the same employer. So that, yes, it would extend outside the workplace. Am I answering your question?
Yes. And I'm remembering now that the sentence before that makes that a little more clear than what I just read.
Okay.
Also, in this document, there's a referral to a form that can be filled out, but I didn't see it in the sexual harassment document, just the forms in the...
It's the same incident form for, you're referring to sexual harassment. It's the same incident complaint form that we have on file, but I usually, when I send out the policies, I send out the complaint form. I can add it to this policy as well.
No, I mean, yeah, if they're being sent out together, then it's the same form.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, go ahead.
That's Appendix 2 in the violence document, the workplace violence incident report form? Or
Are you referring to sexual harassment or the
sexual
workplace
harassment?
violence?
But I thought you said it was the same form as the...
So we have the same complaint form from the previous policy. This is just another policy. The complaint same. There's no update to the complaint form.
Got it, okay. And then on Appendix 2 in the violence prevention form, there's a question that I read as a little bit unclear and I mean, I guess it's for internal use, so there's training to be able to answer it, but the question was the victim injured, read as a little bit vague to me, whether it was only referring to physical injury, which the follow-up question would imply, or if we're defining injured more broadly. Like mental trauma.
So, and it's an internal form. We can always put what type of injury was sustained. I mean, I can change the wording on that.
Also, I'm being nitpicky, but overall, I think this is excellent work, and I really did appreciate in both documents some of the articulation of the purpose and goals, particularly in the sexual harassment policy and the clarification that what certain identities and intersecting identities mean, and also that this policy is intended for multiple types of discrimination, not just sexual harassment. I think that's really important, so well done.
Thank you. Thank you for your feedback. I'm over here sweating a little bit, so sorry. Putting the pressure on. But I will get back to you about the updates and any other changes you'd like us to make.
Okay. Thanks, Sarah.
Would you like, okay.
Yeah, you want to, Sarah, you want to do the next one?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I'll just a high-level overview of the sexual harassment policy.
Oh, I meant Martha Wilnowski. I thought we were...
Yeah, I thought we were done.
Oh, we're done? Okay.
Yeah, I think we're done with... I was moving to Martha.
Yeah.
We need to hire Martha.
Okay, great. Hire her. Thanks so much.
That's the best hiring presentation we've gotten.
All in favor?
All right. I think, Chris, you're intended to do this.
I guess it's...
It's on you.
So we are proposing to hire Martha Wilnowska to the position of Deputy City Clerk. You have her resume and also a memo from Amanda Caputo, the clerk, city clerk. I actually participated in, we did 2 rounds of interviews on this one just to make sure we had the right fit. The second interview, I spent more than an hour and 15 minutes with Martha, and we think she would be a good fit for the department. She had a long tenure with the Orange County Office of the Aging. She did COVID tracking during that time, and I think she would be a great fit for this. So we'd like to bring her to council next week, and then she can start in mid-December. She has a couple contract jobs she has to finish she's a graphic artist as well. And no, she's not going to do a lot of graphic art for us, unless we ask really nicely.
It's not in the job description.
It's
Shouldn't
not
make
in
her
the
do
job
it, so.
description, but I see her as being somebody that might help us.
Okay.
Thank you, Sarah.
If she's still there.
Sarah's still there, but you can hang up.
I like that she speaks Polish as a second language.
Yes.
Dziękuję.
I don't speak any, but.
Okay. Next one is an agreement for engineering design of South Avenue Park improvements, and Chris, you're going to tell us about that.
Yes. We've talked about improvements that we want to make to South Avenue Park. They include elements that the council had requested, such as a public restroom. So what we're doing, we've put that into the capital project. We may need a little bit more money depending on how much it ends up being, and we are trying to get a detailed design and bid documents. So we went back to the firm that did our community facility and program report. That firm is Weston and Sampson. They're very familiar with our facilities. They're very familiar with our staff. We asked them for a proposal, and you have that in your packet. We're looking for them to, originally we were going to replace some retaining walls. Instead, we're taking them out. We'd like to regrade them. We'd like to resurface the tennis courts and the basketball courts, repair all of the fencing and replace the mesh that's on it, which is quite old and not in good repair. Adding a restroom, updating lighting from metal halide, which is not particularly efficient, to LED lighting, redoing walkways in South Avenue, and then replacing benches. So that scope of work we approximate is about $350,000 of work. We did get an initial grant award from Jonathan Jacobson, our assembly member, in the amount of $150,000. So I'm processing the paperwork with the Dormitory Authority of the State of New York, or DASNY, and we hope to have a grant agreement on that prior to the spring. We would like to launch this project in late spring, so we'd like to get them going on the design. They would do a schematic design, meaning like a conceptual. Then once Mark is, and we have to look at the sewer hookups, the water hookups, utilities. Once staff is good with that, we would run with a final design. They take us through bidding, and then they would also do post-bidding construction support. So their fee comes to $39,200, which is just over 11% of the construction budget. It's pretty good because it includes both the design and the construction. So that's well within normal ranges.
Any questions on that one?
Yeah, I had a question because they haven't mentioned it was outside of scope, the stormwater pollution and prevention plan. My understanding is that's not about what drainage might be needed on the site for like once it's up and running. That's more about during construction. Do they need to have special plans in place to mitigate any runoff? Is that my?
It's actually about both, but it's only if you exceed an acre of disturbance. And we're not disturbing any new, it's not like we're building on pervious surfaces right now. We're redoing impervious surfaces, and in fact, we're probably, you're only going to have the added footprint of just the restroom facility, which is, just probably a couple hundred square feet. Nick, if you want to opine further.
No, Chris, that's correct. There is a required stormwater pollution prevention program in place if you're disturbing more than an acre, but I don't believe this falls within that category.
Right.
And then one very specific thing, and I know this might be more detailed stuff, but as we're putting in a bathroom, I don't know if the idea of having a water fountain or a water bottle filling station, if that's something that we would do separately, or if we can see if that's possible to include in an ideal scope.
Yeah, we can see if
Great.
we can see if that would fit. If it doesn't fit in the scope, we can find other ways to do it.
Yeah.
We would want this to be modeled on the bathrooms at Memorial and Green Park. I really, it's not in the scope of work, but we would want it muraled so that it has less desirability for graffiti and it's just, we want it to look like our other parks so that they have a consistent look and feel. Maybe a little nicer bathroom, but.
I imagine people playing basketball and tennis are thirsty, so it's probably not a bad idea.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
They do seem to always attract the hottest days of the year for their tournaments, at least the past couple of years.
Okay. Go ahead.
Just a general procurement question. Can you explain why there wasn't a bid process for this? And just, I'm sure this is 101.
Yeah, so you don't, under our procurement law and under New York State General Municipal Law, you don't have to bid professional services.
Got it.
We have to bid purchases of equipment and supplies above $20,000 and work above $35,000 for construction. For professional services, sometimes it makes sense to do an RFP, a request for proposals. In this case, if they had come back and said, well, yeah, we'll design this for $100,000, that's probably what we would have done. But we had a vendor that we were familiar with and confident in.
Got it. Yeah, I'm not questioning the choice. I was just procedurally trying to catch myself up on how it works. I'm just excited this project is moving forward.
Yeah, me too. And again, I'm sorry, I know that you have all come to me with things, and I say I don't have the bandwidth, and this is one of the reasons I haven't had a lot of bandwidth. We are trying to queue up the next round of projects, and you've heard about a number of them tonight. This is also one of them, and putting solar panels on the highway garage in the spring or summer is one of them. So we've gotten money for grants, and I can't leave these projects languishing and risk losing that money.
Okay. Anything else on that one? So the other one is the Community Compost Company for waste pickup?
Yeah. So we talked a little bit about this in the budget. We had started a compost program. We started talking about it in 2021. I think this council actually approved the first contract in March of 2022 to hire a firm called CRP Sanitation out of Westchester, who would come and pick up 10 toters of compost that we had at 3 separate sites. And we have these compost bins at Churchill Street parking lot, at Memorial Park, and also at 23 West Center Street. We eventually went to 12 bins. We've been through at least one amendment with CRP. This year they restructured their fees, and it would have doubled the cost per month for pickup from about $620 to $1,200. We asked Faye Leone and the Compost Working Group, Phil, to go looking out for other options. They weighed a couple and they came back with a recommendation that's in your packet to go with the Community Compost Company. They have a farm in Cohasson where they bring the compost and then they sell it as organic, certified organic compost. They are offering us the same service. I actually think it's better service for $575 a month. Why I would say it's better is CRP, we had them line the garbage, the toters, with a BPI plastic bag. And it just was an ongoing battle to make sure they got the bags, and they were reminding us when they needed more bags, and there was an extra fee for taking this out. Community Compost Company actually has a power washer on their truck, And so they dump it, and then they power wash it, and then they dump the power wash material into their truck as well. So we're hoping to avoid, the extra cost and the logistical obstacles of having these bags. And they just seem like a company that's more focused on the CRP. This wasn't really their business model. And we're excited to try that. So we would begin this in the first part of 2024. It is less money, so we are talking about adding perhaps a fourth pickup site or do an additional backyard bin. So the money that we save, I'm not asking to take down the budget item for this. That would be for other things that we've wanted to do: promotional materials, educational materials, a banner, signage, directional signage to these sites, which I know Mark has been working with the working group on. So it gives us an opportunity to spend less and actually work with somebody who really cares about this model. And I would just say this has been a really successful program. Universally, we've had people relay that they use it, they appreciate it. It gets a little ripe in August. We're still figuring that one out, but I would say it's a program I would like to continue and try to make more sustainable. One of the nice things about the pickup here is that Community Compost comes one day a week already for their private clients, and we're going to piggyback on that day. So there's not a special trip from Kerhonk's, and it's, they're going to pick up while they're here already.
So is there anything different about what they offer?
Thank you. There is. They will take everything that we currently compost, which is anything plant-based or even animal-based. What they can't take are the BPI plastics, which are much harder to break down. So if you have so-called compostable cups and flatware and bags, those can't go in it.
So we need another commercial for the mayor to do.
Do another commercial. I think they're already working on it, but they have a flyer, I think, that's in your packet, and the CAC will be doing educational outreach before we renew this. We'll also update our signage at the sites to make sure that people know, please don't. BPI is only compostable if you have a system that really burns the compost down.
It also gives off methane emissions.
Does it?
Yeah, BPI plastics,
Wow.
and they break down.
Okay.
Yeah, this was my big question, which you've already answered, which is sort of the plan for rolling out the shift and making sure people know what they can and can't compost now. But I love that your plan is to take the money that we're saving and invest it into expanding the program. I think that's great. I did have one technical question. If you know, I'm not sure what the definition of molded fiber is.
I actually know that. That's
Hey.
stupidly. So like sometimes when you buy like computer equipment and stuff, you get this kind of molded thing that looks like it's paper, and in a large compost facility that will cook down and burn. It just takes too long to break down for these composts.
So,
You can put some incidental paper products, like if you have a part of a pizza box and it's soiled with, the food, that will break down. But those hard, they're like really durable. They're meant to
Yeah.
keep things from breaking in a box.
okay, so like egg carton box, can those still go in the compost, or is that considered molded fiber?
So we should ask Faye that.
Okay.
But I would say if it's the paper, that's probably, they break down quick enough that, yeah, you probably could get away with it. No?
We'll ask Faye. I don't think so.
Okay.
Should those place bets?
You can recycle those in our recycling system, though.
Yeah.
But do they get recycled, or do we just get charged for hauling them?
These are philosophical questions that are above my pay
All right,
grade.
I'm sorry, it's too late, it's too late. I'll stop.
So it sounds like, I think you answered this too, that with the power washing they have on their pickup, that there won't be a gap in when the totes are available for people, that they'll be able
That's right.
to dump them right there and then put
Yeah.
them right back. Great.
Yes, so we'll try it. And again, this has been a learning experience on all parts of it. And I think we've got a company that's more willing to work with us on, you know, on.
Oh, yeah, and that's, so it's a 1 year, I think it's referred to as a pilot program at one point in what we saw, like, is it a
Well,
one-year
your
contract?
original, it might have been in a contract. That was language in the original, because you'll remember we did it for 6 months, and then it was like, oh, that worked great, let's just keep doing it. I wouldn't consider this a pilot at this point, but it would be a 1 year, it would be a 1 year contract. And Nick, before I forget, I'd like to add something into the resolution allowing us to add a
To renew
fourth
it.
site, you know, with your approval of the contract. So that if midway through the year, we figure out, really, we're trying to figure out where it would go, where it doesn't compete with the one they have at the Veterans Building, which people pay to use. And people outside of Beacon, in fact, use it.
All right, I look forward to our education, because if you can't use bags, it will be interesting as to how people bring them to the facility.
Well, I'm glad you asked that, because the working group has these nifty little containers that are for sale. So you can get yourself a compost container.
Mhm.
Maybe we'll have you in the video this time again to show us what not to compost.
There you go. Like I said, I look forward to doing all the wrong things again. Okay, cool. All right, one last item, folks. I picked just one item on the zoning, which was the minimum parking. I thought that would be the most isolated, kind of simplest, one-only thing. I did happen just to read something in the NICOM monthly that just came out. There's 5 practical zoning hacks for what they call missing middle housing, and one of the hacks was eliminating parking minimums. So I just thought I'd pass it along. There's a couple of other ones, and there are actually ideas that we're looking at, including minimum unit sizes. So I just thought it was interesting. Hey, John Clark, are you online, or have you retired for the night?
No, I'm here.
There you go. Okay, so John, so tell us why this one is whittled down to only the minimum parking stuff, nothing else, and while it's long, it's actually very straightforward, right?
Yes.
Hopefully.
A lot of the length is crossing things out. A clean version will be shorter. I did expand one section after our discussion 2 weeks ago. I made 2 significant changes. One, if you go to paragraph D on page 5, which is sort of the guts of the argument, that in order to promote walkability and avoid excessive automobile traffic and unnecessarily large paved parking lots, no minimum off-street parking spaces are required except for 1 space each for a single-family dwelling, 2-family dwelling, or accessory apartment. I broke these up into sort of 4 paragraphs, so I could expand and make them a little clearer, as opposed to having one large paragraph. The second paragraph says that the essential way that parking is going to be determined is during site plan approval by the planning board, and they will have maximum parking standards in the zoning code, and then they can reason down based on a number of contextual factors how much they think is appropriate for the site. That's paragraph 2. I did add things in there that refer to land banking section, which the planning board likes to use because it's a sort of a trial period. You reduce the number of parking spaces, but provide them on the site plan where they could go, landscape that area with ground cover, and re-examine after 6 months of operation to see whether indeed those spaces are needed. That's a real good way of making sure that you're not making some sort of arbitrary decision that you regret later. It can either maintain itself landscaped or it can be turned back into parking spaces. I will say at least the 6 years, and as far as I know, no land back spaces have been reclaimed for parking because we tend to overestimate parking rather than underestimate it. I also put in a reference to the American with Disabilities Act so that there's compliance with that. The third paragraph specifically talks about if the planning board asks for a professional parking study. In a lot of, at least major site plans, you'll ask for a professional parking study. Right now, the way they usually do it is they go to the Institute for Transportation Engineers parking standards book, come up with a number out of that, and compare it to the minimum required in the zoning law, and then you sort of bargain back and forth based on that. What I found, and I think the general critique of the ITE standards is they're based on suburban models. They're oftentimes have very few actual surveys to back up the data. So the data tends to be overestimating and unreliable. And it's almost uniformly used as the way to determine what parking is required, because otherwise it's deemed to be arbitrary. So the way that it will work under this proposal is that the planning board will have all access to that, a parking study, and if they want ITE standards, but it emphasizes that the primary way of dealing with this is by looking at site-specific conditions, the location of the site, the size of the site, the use, that sort of thing, a comparable analysis of similar uses in property in the area or region. If you remember, just recently they did a rewrite of the parking standards for storage facilities because they were really high. And so the applicant went out and looked at storage facilities in the area, in town of Fishkill and places nearby, came up with real numbers based on local examples, and came up with a much lower standard that was appropriate for that use. That's the sort of thing I would hope that the planning board would work off of, rather than national standards. And then you can also, it requires an examination of demand reduction strategies. So specifically looking at promotion of walking, bicycle parking, or storage facilities on the site, alternative mobility options like scooters or e-bikes, transit access opportunities, ride sharing, carpooling, things like that. So the applicant will have to go through an exercise of at least thinking about how that they can reduce parking, or whether parking demand can be reduced on the site. And then the last paragraph talks about the maximum off-street parking table that follows. And again, it's been turned from minimum to maximum. And it provides guidance to the planning board on the maximum parking spaces that should be allowed. But the planning board may approve fewer spaces in many cases. So I expanded and made that much more detailed. And then I went through the list again. Someone on the council last time pointed out that there were certain phrases in there like greater and lesser that created confusion since they're no longer requirements. They're more guidance. So I took on all those references to lesser. And so if there's two standards, the planning board can pick or choose which one they would think is most appropriate. And I did reduce some of them, as you can see, that were really large for today's recognized parking standards. They're real leftover from the 70s and 80s when parking was king and overestimating parking was sort of standard routine. As an example, in your code, you require for bars one space for every 50 square feet of floor area, excluding the kitchen and the utility areas. Every 50 square feet, whereas a restaurant is, which presumably would be similar in the number of parking spaces, is 3 times less. So you're requiring 3 times more for a bar than a restaurant based on the number of square foot. So it seems like you're encouraging people to be auto-dependent when they go to the bar and drive home. Things like that are just anomalies in the code that I think should be corrected, even if they're considered maximum standards rather than minimum.
5 spaces for each bowling lane is currently our minimum requirement. Is that right? Jeez.
I'd love to have a bowling lane back.
There you go.
It's not the most in-demand use.
All right. This is consistent with what you said last time. You said you were going to work on that one section. I appreciate that. Any questions from folks? I just thought this was straightforward enough. It was going to be late because I knew there was a lot on the calendar, and I thought we could bring this one forward.
Yeah, I'm certainly amenable to this. I have things about, is this going far enough to really shift things, but that is not an argument not to do this. I appreciate, John, that you did bring this to the planning board's last meeting, but weren't able to discuss it because you discussed something else that they might have feedback for us in the future. And so I think for me, then I would want, as the new phrasing of this is like, well, the planning board will take care of this. I would want our current planning board to get their input. My understanding, and actually a lot of my hesitation, came from when the concept of this was initially brought to them a month or two ago. They seemed to have a lot of questions about how it would work in practice. And so now that we have a more concrete thing for them to respond to, I'd be very curious to get their input on it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I tried to squeeze it into the last workshop session, and it just didn't. They got
had a lot of
verbose
questions
on
about
on the
that,
first
yeah.
law.
A proper
And this would be referred to the planning board as well as the county planning board for a report and recommendation.
Ben, was this referred to the county yet? I know we had a finding of no outside impact.
For the parking?
Was it?
It would have to be placed in a form of a local law,
Oh, yeah.
a draft. This is
I
just
think it was the other
additional
one to
draft.
do with the subdivisions
The internal lot
within,
line
yeah, the internal lot
subdivisions.
lines, thank you. Which they did
Generally,
discuss
we
it.
do that when we set a public hearing. We'll also, in the same resolution, refer that to the planning boards.
So this is my first meeting where this is on the agenda, because I actually was coincidentally sick on the days when this was previously discussed. So I think generally, I think we probably are prescribing more parking than is needed. But there's notable examples where we prescribed a lot less than was needed. So for example, when the Beacon Theater came online, it had no parking. And most people who parked on the east end of Main Street remember that it was very easy to find parking on the east end of Main Street before all of those housing units went online. And that was that's when traffic got bad on the east end of Main. That was probably a decision of the zoning board. I don't know who it was. I don't know the story.
So it was just in that the Beacon Theater was able to use the 1964 provision language that is proposed to be eliminated in this amendment, whereby if there was a use in existence in 1964 before, you could then apply still to use that use, but only require, I think, 25% of the parking. So that provision is being removed.
Okay. But there's only maximum requirements. So if they could approve that project with zero parking under this law.
They could, yes.
So we're not taking out that 1964
No, it's
thing
just a
doesn't
factual
really-
response to
Oh, I see.
the
Okay.
question as to why.
Okay. So yeah, I guess I'm worried that that there could be errors in judgment down the road that really blow certain parts of town up. The finding, they had to stripe Van Nydek. They, the parking lot is always full by the theater now. And our Main Street Access Committee found that that's where the worst parking is now. So I guess I don't know, where in this law we prevent that from happening again. I think having the minimum of one for each house for single family and two family is a good idea, because one of the things that I'm worried about is this causing congestion on certain streets. But what I can't get my head around is why there's no minimum parking for a multifamily. So you have a minimum requirement for a single family home, but not a minimum requirement for an apartment building. Am I reading that incorrectly?
I think it's because, and John can answer this, but what I think he's told us is because single-family homes usually don't come before the planning board.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't get reviewed the way that multifamily homes do. So that's why we wanted to make sure that was in our code. John, is that an accurate summary of why?
Yes. So any multifamily would become before the planning board. They would have all the rights to do anything up into the maximum standards, and even more if they felt it was appropriate. I remember, there are no specific hard and fast minimums or maximums. There's guidance on maximums, and then the ability to come down from that if you think it's appropriate. again, what I would suggest is that there's a lot of communities have done this, and there's been no great horror stories that come out of this, because applicants don't want to minimize the amount of parking unless there's some parking available, because they want to have satisfied tenants, and they want to be able to get construction loans from banks. So there is a sort of a built-in mechanism for providing an adequate amount of parking based on the realities of the site and the needs of the proposed residents. And the planning board can work with the applicant to come up with that number, rather than having an arbitrary number that's coming out of who knows where back in 1970, or the ITE standards, which are based on a parking survey that was done in 1995 in San Diego or someplace else. And that's how they do it now. It's very arbitrary. So this will be based on the specifics of the site and give the planning board latitude to overestimate and then put some land banking in to cover their bases. That sort of thing can happen.
But they could also go the other direction and accidentally not have enough. The reason I raised this is because I've seen, over the years since I've been watching planning board agendas, I can, if I had a dime for every application that showed that the property was going to use the public parking across the street or something, or was going to use somebody else's parking, to the point where everybody is, creating projects that are going to use the same parking spot, which is why East Main is the east end of Main Street is such a hard place to find a parking spot. So I guess I still have some concerns about, yes, we need less parking. Obviously, I would like for people to be using cars less, but that doesn't mean that they are, just because I want them to. So the cars are going to have to go somewhere. And so I guess I'm still just a little on the fence about, where are these cars really going for the bigger buildings, if the planning board makes an error in judgment.
So
You can't undo it.
Yeah, let me suggest that we divide our thinking into three buckets, right? Single family or two family homes, Main Street, and everywhere else where there's multifamily. I think what has happened in practice is, I don't think we have any concerns on single family, and in fact, we've, put a minimum in. They're not going to come to planning board. But I think that the other two, Main Street and everywhere else where we've had multifamily, like think about along the creek, or think about Edgewater going up right now. What this parking law has done currently is it's overbuilt the places that can build parking. And on our Main Street, we don't have any parking. And so what has really happened there is we just throw our hands up, we take $10,000 per spot or whatever our fee is, and we just say we'll have to build something else. I actually think that that's generally the correct thing to do.
We don't have a system for that thing.
A system for?
A fee.
We used to.
Correct, used to, but that's
got
not
rid
in
of
the
it?
code, correct. Yes.
Okay.
Wait, sorry.
So,
Did we get rid of it?
No, it was a while ago.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
okay. So I don't think that using the example of Main Street building and we'll find parking somewhere else, that's kind of what we want folks to do, because those buildings, by their nature, don't have enough parking at all. And if we had any parking requirement at all, Main Street buildings wouldn't even have buildings, they would just have parking. So I don't think that that's the right approach to consider for Main Street buildings. On non-Main Street buildings, again, what we see is that we consistently are overbuilding our parking. And so I think this will have a much better effect on those areas. And the example that's in front of us was the one on Route 52 at Conklin. And there we looked at it and said, hey, this is a really good design, except it's got too much parking. And it doesn't have enough, shrubbery. I actually think this is what that's designed for. And I think that the Main Street example, no matter what standard we have, there isn't any parking on Main Street. So I don't see how we're going to solve that with a minimum standard.
There is available parking on Main Street. Dan is right that the east end is a real problem right now. But the rest of the parking on Main Street is pretty adequate. The parking survey that was done, part of the Main Street Access Committee, came up that, within a block of Main Street, only 69% of the total parking spaces were filled on what can be considered one of the busiest days of the year. A Saturday during full leaf autumn colors on a sunny day. And yes, you couldn't park on Main Street, but you could park on the side streets, one block from Main Street. 56% of the parking spaces were full. That means there's a lot of parking within one block of where you want to go. And the county lot and other major public facilities were not at all crowded. Even Henry Street had available parking on those days. So it was only the East End and Main Street itself that were maxed out. So the perception of parking, I think, is much worse than the actual parking, number one, even in Main Street area. And two, there's alternatives like the free bus system that can ferry people back and forth from parking spaces. So if you need to park on the county lot and go to the East End, there's the ability to do that and get back.
There was, thanks, John. There was some language in here that led me to think that we were banning carports, like structures for parking. I'm trying to find the section now.
I don't remember any reference to carport in here.
No, it was about structures for parking in the front of the building. Sorry, I'm tired and talking and searching at the same time.
Oh, there is provision in the existing
front yard.
Sorry?
No parking in the front yard, I think is the language you're talking about? Yes.
Maybe it was for structures in the front or something.
Yes.
Anyway.
In the current law, you're not allowed to build designated parking spaces in the front yard of a house.
Isn't that
of any
called a
residential
driveway?
in any residential district.
B2 on page 2.
Sorry?
B2 on page 2.
Yes.
Yep,
Bingo.
that's where I am. Okay.
And it's always been a little confusing because the definition of a front yard in the back of the definition section is between the front lot line and the front plane of the building. But people try to interpret it as being what the setback is, because in the table, setbacks are called front yard setbacks. So I just clarified the existing law that you can't have designated spaces in the front yard in front of the front plane of the existing building.
Oh, I see.
So that there was clarity on that. So it wasn't changing the law, it was just clarifying it. Because that's always been a confusion among applicants. They think that the front yard is the first 10 feet, right, where the required front yard setback is. But the definition of front yard in the definition section is from the lot line to the front of the street. So you can still park in your front yard, but you have to have 2 spaces that are outside the front yard in a residential district. And there's some exceptions for multifamily and odd shaped lots and things like that.
So the word facility is being used not as a structure, but as no designated off-street parking facility?
Yes.
That can mean a parking space or a building. Right?
Okay.
That's what I guess he's saying, right?
Okay.
I'm not sure.
I'm not really quite getting this.
Yeah, that's how it's interpreted, as the actual designated space. So that's supposed to be either in the garage or to the side or rear of the building. Of course, people park in front of the garage, and you can't stop that, but they have to have at least or at least one designated space behind the front plane of the building, so that you don't have cars, approved in the front yard of buildings.
Nick, do you think that the way that this section is worded is precise enough?
No, so actually I do have some comments I want to work with John on.
Okay, because I was coming at this brand new, and I was reading this paragraph, and I read it as we were doing away with garages and carports.
I can see how that could be read. I didn't have that reading, but I'll work with John on this. And you have an opportunity to write the schedule here and get comments from the planning board and the county, then review this again.
Okay. The only other thing that I wanted to contribute tonight was with regards to the landscaping section. I'm interested in looking at this in a little more detail, though I wasn't prepared for tonight, but I would like to see requirements for more trees. Instead of every 10 parking spaces, perhaps we have a smaller number. But I also wanted to know if this is kind of like an opportunity for us to look at how parking spaces are built. So we don't, currently we don't have any requirements for impermeable, permeable surfaces. So I thought maybe this would be an opportunity, since we're working on this law, to say that when you are putting in new parking spaces, that water has to be able to penetrate through the surface, which obviously is much better for the water flows between a mountain and a river. So I just was wondering if this would be the appropriate place to do that.
I like that idea.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, we talk about in the section below grades, drainage, paving, and
Right,
I
right.
think there's, I see room in here for that addition.
I just put on the radar that as someone that's built projects with pervious pavement and other treatments like that, not every type of subsurface can actually absorb it. So you want to leave enough latitude that, like we had a site where we thought about doing it, and it was just like a clay bowl, and it would have just sat there. It wouldn't have ever infiltrated down into the groundwater. So some kind of, maybe it's a question for our engineer, like,
Or maybe it's the planning board shall consider, right, the feasibility of it. So that way, at least it's on the table for examination.
yeah, I would just want to leave room for the things that we don't know. Like there is
Mhm.
some type of soil that really doesn't.
Clay.
Yeah.
Yeah, clay.
Yeah.
But
I think there's
rock,
ways
too,
around that. I think they do like gravel and, I don't know, but, yeah, let me.
But yeah, I
You
would
you
put
could
it-
say impervious surfaces are required in parking spaces where the soil permits,
Yeah, that's.
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
instance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fully
So it
support
puts
that.
the onus on the developer to prove that it's not feasible.
And why did we do away with the $10,000 per parking spot thing?
My recollection was, and I think it was even before my time, was that it was actually impeding development at that time, because it was proposed at a time when, different from where the city is now, where development was not as robust.
Okay.
That's what Tim Dexter told me.
Lee, was that in the Main Street Access Committee recommendations? Am I making that up?
So what I asked them to look at was if there was a need for parking, to consider how to finance it.
Uh-huh.
And I offered up 3 ideas, which was, all right, if you need to have meters, talk about meters. If you have residents who want to have guaranteed parking, then they could have a parking sticker, they pay monthly.
Right.
And then the other one was that the owners who didn't have parking would pay some fee. Those who did have parking would be fine, right?
Mhm.
They shouldn't be subsidizing the ones who don't. And they didn't come back with anything specific because they didn't think that the numbers were there to warrant some kind of a system yet,
Mhm.
right? If we ever want to build a parking structure, we have to kind of think our way through that. And it needn't be an upfront fee, right? Meaning you pay once and you never have to do it again. I think the more appropriate one would be the buildings that have never gotten anything ought to be paying because they got away with it. Either we didn't need it, there was lots of parking back then, but if now we do, would be my preferred approach. But they didn't see much need for it yet, so.
And phase 1 really talked about doing a better job of delineating the
Exactly,
parking
yeah.
on side streets, which we've been doing, and reconfiguring. So we reconfigured the Eliza Street, or some people call it Church Street lot, and we just redid the parking on Henry Street to go from parallel parking to diagonal.
Yeah.
So we're trying to maximize the space that's already usable in there.
Yeah, my concern if we, build a parking structures, we'll build it for today, and 20 years ago, it won't be needed. 20 years later, right? Yeah. Let me see if I can go the right direction in terms of time. That 20 years later, right, we won't need that kind of parking. So it'll be interesting for us to kind of get our way through the easy wins, some of the, early stuff to do, and then to start to consider long-term structures that require capital financing.
Yeah, to that end, I'm wondering how many people who maybe live in that area, I kind of heard you reference that. Dan, is there a way to incentivize them to perhaps use some of our other less populated county lots for longer-term parking, and different fee structures for that parking, if you don't have a space, might be the way to do it? I don't have an answer to what that means in practice beyond that statement, but I'm curious too about how we encourage people who don't need to they're not parking because they're accessing that business right now, it's because they live there, but could they actually walk to another place where their car is parked that is not in such a high demand area?
It was repealed in 2008, and it had a fee of $1,500 per space.
Okay. That sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And I believe it got absorbed into the general fund, and it never got applied to any
Yes,
parking.
I know.
That's
That was the
correct,
problem.
yes.
I agree, totally. Right.
So if we wanted to refer this to the planning board and the county board, do we need to vote on it our next voting meeting? So what are the next steps from here?
So the next step would be our office would work with John, make some of the changes discussed tonight, prepare a local law, put it in a local law format, and then at your next meeting on Monday, you would refer to the two planning boards and schedule a public hearing.
Right, and that we would still have opportunities to edit further.
Absolutely.
But it's just starting the parallel process of getting some input while we're going through our process.
Correct.
Okay.
I did want to flag that I agree with you, Dan, that we should at least look at requiring trees for fewer parking spaces. I'd like to at least look at that.
All right. John, can you take a peek at that part of it?
Absolutely.
Yep, see where you think we are in terms of, how we compare to others and whether we could be better at it?
10 is relatively, that's sort of the middle range of what people generally do. Some do 12, some do 10. I'll have to look to see if anybody does less than that. You might be able to go down to 8.
They're not as daring as Beacon.
Climate leaders.
Oh, okay, but the hard part here is one of the things we're trying to do with minimum parking is reduce the cost of building so that that kind of middle cost housing can actually be affordable, right? Because the numbers that we've seen is that if we don't get rid of spaces, it becomes prohibitive to build some of the housing. Now, having said that, a tree's a lot cheaper than another space.
Yeah.
So
I don't think that's going to be what breaks the bank.
But I just said we just should be careful, mindful of the goal, right?
Sure, I get it. I mean,
yeah.
The real problem is constricted spaces. You're on small city lots, and you're required, or in future cases, perhaps you'll be asked to provide so many parking spaces, and the trees limit the more trees, the less parking. So on tight city lots, sometimes you need the extra spaces. The 10 has seemed to work in terms of, I've been able to get that every time on the site without unduly. But you can certainly go down to a lesser number if that's what you want to do.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else to suggest to John and Nick as for any further changes?
I'm sorry,
And we'll have time to do more, too.
Okay.
Yeah, I think maybe it's just late, but I'm still trying to wrap my head around this idea that people were paying a fee to not include parking, and I'm curious if there's any overlap between this plethora of developments who want to count city lots as part of their parking requirements, and if there is some sort of give back that we can charge a fee to those developers for that. Are these two completely different concepts?
Yeah, you can do both. The Village of Rhinebeck has a parking in lieu fee that's used quite often. The problem is the business owners in the commercial district was so up in arms about how much it was costing that they reduced the fee down to something that has never created a parking space. So it's gone into this parking fund that usually is used for, fixing the asphalt on the existing lots rather than creating new lots, because the fee has to be substantial enough to pay for urban land, which costs a lot of money. So the parking fee in lieu has to have a significant charge per space, which applicants hate. It really discourages any development if they have to pay $10,000 a space and they're required to put in 15 or 20 spaces. I've suggested that instead of, and I think the mayor alluded to this, instead of requiring an upfront fee, which hurts a business right when they're investing and putting a lot of money into it already, into a site to put up a business, instead give them a $50 per month fee or something that they can, and in the long run, the city will make out on that because it'll create this revenue generation that'll keep going rather than a one-time fee that gets sort of lost in the works. The other thing is that you can lease public spaces. The parcel on the corner of the northeast corner of Elm Street lease spaces from the county lot in order to meet their residential parking requirement. So that can be done rather than giving them away for free if you have surplus spaces in the evening.
Okay, yeah, I guess I don't have a specific proposal in terms of this particular law, but thank you for explaining those options.
Okay. Enough for the evening?
Motion to adjourn?
Okay.
Oh, wait, we do that.
So let me just clarify. So Nick and John, will you take a look at the areas we asked you to look at and a couple of others, bring forward a proposal that is written enough so that we can make referrals at the next meeting?
That is correct, yes.
Okay, council okay with that?
Potentially set a public hearing also.
Yes.
Yeah, right? And again, we still have room to make adjustments because we're kind of moving in parallel. As you know, George said, parallel parking, right? Okay. Anything else? Then we'll just call it an evening, right? I don't think we need a motion to adjourn. I'm
You
just
do.
saying.
Nope, you need a motion to
Oh, I need a
adjourn.
motion to adjourn.
Heard from Paloma. Second.
All right. And that was Paloma and Justice. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you all and good night. Okay.
Happy Thanksgiving
Thanks
to
for your
all.
patience, everybody.